When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be finishing off Season 1 and looking at what the show missed that was in the books and what it exactly cut out and changed. Now, we're not hitting like every single possible thing you could, like maybe a character's thoughts or their appearances at times, but overall looking at some of the differences from the books to the show. For some of you that had been anticipating this, because I've been uploading it weekly, I wanted to basically have a happy medium between people that really didn't watch this series, which was most of my channel, versus fulfilling what I wanted to do and to finish the first season and all of that stuff. So this is going to be a long video. Sit tight as we go through the last 5 episodes of Season 1. Oh boy, we're going to be starting off with a big change very quickly, it would appear. Poor Ned. So, for book readers, you know this chapter opens very differently. For a lot of people, it might even be their favorite Ned chapter overall, is that when we see that Ned actually got attacked by Jaime, and the chapter directly afterwards where he's healing up and Robert and Cersei are in the room, actually what takes place before all of that is that Ned gets a dream. He has like a fever dream. And so he's dreaming of the Tower of Joy, or what we believe actually happened there. It's the only time that we've heard anything about it or seen it, so it's through a dream. It's not exactly fully accurate. People have made theories all about it, but the general idea is what you see later on in the show. If you're a show-only watcher, Season 6, where Bran goes through the past and sees what happens between Arthur, Dane, and Ned, where Ned's party of northern men fight with then the Kingsguard. That's basically what takes place in Ned's fever dream. And also one thing that's really prevalent that I'm just going to address here, but Ned throughout the rest of the book, and especially if you look at the show, the last few episodes, he really thinks of Lyanna a lot. There's a lot of reasons to, because what's happening is very relevant to what we believe happened at the Tower of Joy, with Jon being, well, the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna. A lot of things going on towards the end of Robert's Rebellion really factor into why Ned does certain things in the next few episodes, and he thinks about that a lot. And so there is a big missing part of this start to this episode that I think would have been very disappointing for book readers that would not really get paid off until later on in Season 6.
He's attacked one of my brothers and abducted the other. I should wear the armor, and you the gown.
Not a good thing to say to Robert. Ooh, not a good look either, Robert.
See what she does to me, my loving wife.
Cersei is not a great wife, but let's not defend Robert's actions here. That's all I'm going to say.
I should not have hit her. That was not kingly.
So I want to pause right there because I do think Mark Addy does a very good job with this character, and it's the reason I think he's become so iconic. I will say one thing they missed from the books, and again, I think that the show and the book are kind of close, but overall, when you look at the book and this happens, after Cersei leaves, it almost feels like Robert doesn't even know who he is anymore. He doesn't know what's happened. And that's not to excuse what he's done. It just kind of makes him feel more, I would say, not pathetic, but like he looks like a more sad individual where he's looking at his hands and he's almost like he doesn't know who he's become. You know, he's hitting his wife, a woman. And a lot of the end of that chapter focuses on that Robert, albeit they won the war. And there's a lot of, again, that parallel to Lyanna, because now Robert starts talking about her, that he might have won the war, but he now lives in misery. He doesn't have Lyanna and all that stuff. And it's, again, very clear that Robert has this idealized version of her, that he never really knew her. And that's very clear when you're inside of Ned's point of view. But because we're not like that in the show, it comes off a lot more sincere, I guess, is the way I would put it, that Robert did actually love Lyanna, because we never really find out much, at least in the first season, that Robert never knew her, really. So I think that's something that kind of changes this dynamic, but overall it just shows that Robert has lived in a life of really despair. This isn't the life he would have wanted to live, and that kind of takes its toll on him. It's why he's such a perfectly written character, and I think the book and the show, I think, also handled him really well.
Blood for blood.
Come on!
You need to make the Lannisters pay for Jory and the others.
You're talking
So this is
about
a
war.
very big difference. I guess it's not that big, but overall, how this plays out in the book is that Robb and their party, Bran obviously is going to go ride, and Robb and Theon have already had this conversation that is happening right now. And I think what's nice about what the show does is the show builds up Theon a lot more as a character and his bond and or at times rivalry, as we'll see in this chapter with Theon. In the book, it's more like Bran and Robb are riding, and Bran kind of gets this vibe, that something's up, that Robb's not telling him something. And so at that point, Robb tells Bran what happened, that Ned was attacked and Jory got killed. Now, this is a big moment for especially Bran, because he's a young kid. He doesn't have a lot of experience with loss, people dying in his life. And so this chapter actually takes a little bit more time to reflect on Jory's death, where they think about what Jory used to do. Like, he took them fishing, I believe, once is what the chapter references here. And so Bran is a lot more of an active person in Robb's life and the growing weight on his shoulders. Whereas here, we don't really spend that time on that. We kind of jump straight into the action of this chapter. And so, yeah, let's continue on.
Let him go and I'll let you live.
Let's go, Robb. Kill that guy. Come on, Robb. Hell yeah, Robb. Okay, so before we go any further, I kind of have to avoid copyright and be very selective when I play these clips. But here's what I'll say. The way this goes down is a bit different, where yes, Robb comes up and Bran basically is being trapped by these other people, these deserters and wildlings, and so Robb has to step in. It's a little different here because Robb basically shows up and the direwolves are there. So the people that are attacking Robb actively know they also have to kill direwolves. Here it's a little different in that context, but overall I'm not going to play like the rest of this scene really because it's very accurate to the book and we're focused on the book scenes that they cut out. So for instance, this they did pretty well. Outside of also, Robb is kind of more of a boy in the book, and so in the show when they aged him up a bit, him kind of shouting for Winterfell or whatever just kind of comes off a little weird given Richard Madden and his age at this point. So let's continue on. Oh, Tyrion, hold on. Chill out. Don't fall over. I feel like that's a nice little shot to basically talk over. So basically with Tyrion's chapter, we don't see him for a little while because we see Catelyn's chapter as she gets to the Eyrie. So we don't see Tyrion's point of view of getting there and the things that he's going through. So a lot of his chapter outside of setting up his confrontation with Lysa and the trial by combat is kind of established in this chapter, where we know that Tyrion has been struggling with, well, food, trying to sleep. And we also know there's this one thing that getting up to the Eyrie is very difficult, and that's what Catelyn's chapter establishes. With that, Tyrion decides to basically go up in a basket that they use to basically bring up food to the Eyrie. And it's meant to basically be like this shaming thing for Tyrion, but in reality, Tyrion is quite thankful for it either way. But yeah, as this plays out, Tyrion is very similar to the way he's presented in the show, where he's kind of manipulating Mord, and we're inside of his head. So we obviously see the way he's trying to manipulate him, how he's trying to set up his plan, all that stuff. And so the show, because we're not in his head, we don't see those things. So for now, this plotline will have a lot to talk about more in this episode, but not with this section. How he handles Mord and all that stuff is very similar. She did it! She ate the horse's heart. Let's go, Dany.
The stallion who mounts the world.
Let's go, Dany. Big speech time. Let's go.
They love her.
So a couple things here, because I'm going to have to stop a couple times with this sequence. First thing, I really like that they give Viserys a little bit of characterization in this scene, where you can tell he's obviously just like, whoa, people love Daenerys. This is a feeling that Viserys has not felt, basically since he has had to flee into exile. And so that feeling is overwhelming to him, especially how much more I think he's characterized in the book because we're in Daenerys' head. That's a nice touch, where when the show, we don't have that benefit, I think those little things is what makes season 1 so great. Second thing, this is where the basically ritual more or less ends in the show, and I think for very good reason. But in the book, this all happens. So she eats the heart, but then she also has to basically go, I guess cleanse herself would be the right way. And so she basically has to go take a bath in this pool. And so that happens, and then she comes out of the pool, and then Drogo, who is just very horny, I guess, seeing this, they basically have sex very quickly in front of everybody. It's very odd to read, and a lot of Daenerys' chapters, especially given the ages, are quite odd, especially when you read them for, I'd say the first time, but even on rereads as well. So that all happens. And then from that point, we then jump straight to Daenerys and the little feast that happens that then leads to Viserys' death. So what you're about to see does not happen, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. Whoa, Viserys, you've done a lot of bad things, but stealing? Come on, that's a whole new... From your sister? Come on.
If I sell one egg, I'll have enough to buy a ship. 2 eggs, a ship, and an army.
And you have all 3.
I need a large army.
It's fair, he does need a large army.
The greatest dynasty this world has ever seen on my shoulders since I was 5 years old. And no one has ever
Such
given me what they
great
gave to her in that
character writing here.
Never. Not a piece of it.
So obviously, all of that is present in the book. But because we're in Daenerys' head, we can see that very clearly. So what I love about this scene is, obviously, it didn't happen in the book. In the book, all we have is just the idea that Jorah tells Daenerys that Viserys was planning to steal her eggs, but Jorah told him that if he did so, he would have taken basically his hand, or something along those lines. It also shows like how much more brutal Jorah is in the book versus the show. In the show, Jorah comes off a lot more as like this caring, lovable guy for Daenerys. In the book, it's very different. One of the biggest changes is Jorah Mormont from the book to the show, and I prefer the book version a lot more. So with this scene being different, and it's not in the book, I think it is so incredibly important to this episode because it shows everything about Viserys' character. Why is he doing the things that he's doing? And that's not to say that he's a good person. He's not. But it goes to show you this person that if he had grown up differently, if circumstances had been different, he might have been a normal brother to Daenerys. He might have been completely fine. But he has lived with the weight of being the last male Targaryen in his eyes and all that kind of stuff. And so here, I think they do a really good representation of that when they don't have the added benefit of being inside of Daenerys' head. So I really love Harry Lloyd, and so I feel like you guys kind of know that by now, but this added scene is one of the best ones that I think goes completely under the radar in the community. I'm laughing just knowing what's coming next.
Where do I begin, my lords and ladies? I'm a vile man. I confess it. I'm good at convincing others to do violence for me. You want specifics, I suppose?
I'm just going to stop it there. But I'll say this. The vibe is definitely different in the book versus the show. Like, they have the same idea, but they definitely went a lot more of a comical route with this. And in the book, it's a bit darker. Like Tyrion says, oh, he's contemplated killing his sister and his father before and stuff like that. So I think they go a little bit more of a comedic route in the show, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing at all. And the rest of the scene's pretty accurate, just in terms of Tyrion wants a trial by combat, and that gets denied. He asks for Jaime. Bronn, sticks up for him more or less, and that'll get us into the next sequence of this plotline. So for this part, again, it's pretty accurate. It's really when we start to get to the actual trial that a lot of things are very different.
More wine, Your Grace.
What a dutiful squire.
What was I saying?
Simpler time?
It was. You're too young to remember. Wasn't it simpler, tell me?
It was, Your Grace.
So I had to play this scene just for George R.R. Martin himself. This was his least favorite scene of season 1, which is kind of crazy to show like how good the first season is in terms of adapting the material. If this is your least favorite scene, that's crazy, because even this is like, it's a solid scene outside of the fact that like George just says, Robert is the king. So why aren't there a ton more people. And if you want to have a good comparison, Viserys in season 1 when he goes hunting is way more accurate to the book than say this scene is. This scene is not very accurate to the book in terms of that regard, but I think it's a very minor thing, and it just comes down to budget. If they had more budget to do this differently, they probably would have, but I don't blame them much here at all. So we're going to continue on. This was just something I wanted to throw in for George, the big man himself.
None your hand. The one
None
who was
your hand.
leading them, taller by a foot than any man I've ever met, saw him cut the blacksmith in two.
Give you back your homes, or restore your dead to life.
You could give them some
Perhaps
gold.
I can give you justice in the name of our king, Robert.
That won't
Lord
do,
Beric
Ned, sorry.
Dondarrion.
Oh, that's Beric?
You shall
He's
have
going
the
to
command.
change soon. Okay, that's a good place to hold it. Yeah, let's put a little screenshot here of Beric. Guys, remember, this is what Beric will look like in the next few seasons. The only thing I really want to say here is when Ned is doing this, and he says he's going to do the justice, he is going to have Gregor killed and all that stuff, it's actually Loras that steps up and he wants to get vengeance and to do all of this. And this is a very controversial moment because for Littlefinger and Varys, other people like that, they see this as a moment where Ned could actually curry favor with the Tyrells, have a connection with them by allowing Loras to go get his revenge on the mountain. Now, there's so many things going on right now because Tywin is actually baiting Ned into doing this. He wants Ned to come himself so that he can basically have Ned as a prisoner and basically end that conflict right away. But because Ned is actually in a position where he can't do that because of his leg, he ends up sending Beric. And so we know how that goes down in the future seasons or the books. But with Loras, and the interesting part here is if he had sent Loras, what would have happened differently? You know, if Loras had been killed, maybe he wasn't made a hostage or anything like that, it's likely the Tyrell and Lannister alliance would never have been made. So there's some really interesting like what ifs that come out of just this scenario, but overall, the only difference is really the idea of Loras is not present in this scene. And then two, there's also, it feels like some undercut like personal emotion with this one because Ned really dislikes how, you know, Gregor was alleged in killing both of Rhaegar's children with Elia. Could be some personal bias in there as well as outside of just the mountain's super unlikable and nobody likes that guy. So it makes sense why Ned would want to kill him. But yeah, so that'll get us then into the next scene. Boy, we skip a ton. So we got to talk about a lot. I mean, Catelyn basically gets 2 of her chapters back to back cut, which is kind of funny. I think the second one you cannot cut. So in episode 5, we talked about a sequence basically of Catelyn's that got cut from the story, which was her journey to the Eyrie. I feel like that one was more understandable. Here, there's a lot that is important. So the first thing is Catelyn basically gets this message about what is happening in the world. She basically gets like a world events update where she finds out what's happening in the Riverlands, where it feels like Tywin is starting to marshal his forces, and especially Jaime, who's now returned to Casterly Rock, that they're going to strike into the Riverlands. And it feels like they already have, just they haven't done it publicly under the Lion banner. And so at that point, Catelyn is really annoyed by this. Why wasn't she told earlier? And the other thing is that as she's going to go confront Lysa about what's happening, she runs into the Blackfish, who the Blackfish has already done the exact same thing that Catelyn has wanted to do. Go to Lysa and say, hey, you know, let's go support your brother. Let's go support your homeland. And Lysa completely shut him down, which infuriated the Blackfish so much that he straight up said, screw it, I'm leaving. I'm going to go try and defend my home, even if it means my death. And so Catelyn talks him out of it and says, hey, you're no good, dead. You can't travel, these passes, the road, the high road, all the way back to Riverrun. You'll die based on the mountain clans or Shadowcats or whatever. So at this point now, the Blackfish is basically going to be a companion of Catelyn's, and he will eventually go back with them to Robb's camp a little later on. And the next part is, Catelyn then goes to the Fool's Festival, which is basically what this little section here is. It's a bunch of people trying to basically get Lysa's favor because they're all seeing where the wind is blowing. If they marry Lysa, they can potentially become the Lord of the Vale at one point. So you see a lot of people flocking around her. Lysa's not taking this trial very seriously at all. She believes Vardis is going to win, no problem. And so we have a couple things here that I think are very important happen. And the main one is Maester Coleman, who is now drunk, he actually reveals a very sly clue to Catelyn and, for George, the reader. Because Maester Coleman tells us that Robin was never going to be fostered with the Lannisters, something we had thought before, and Catelyn had thought before. He was actually going to be fostered with Stannis. And now that changes a lot of things. Now, Catelyn doesn't, put all these pieces together, but she finds this and goes, wait, that can't be true, but it must be. So Catelyn is starting to connect all these dots that maybe she's being lied to, especially in the way that Tyrion brought up evidence that didn't really add to the story, that he wouldn't bet against Jaime. And so there's a lot here, because George is spelling it out to the audience that, Catelyn obviously is being misled, and there's something else going on with Lysa. It gives Lysa a clear motivation as to why she would kill Jon Arryn. And that's not to say that a book reader is going to pick up on that. But when we finally get to Lysa's death later on, and we find out a bit more of what was going on, when you come to this moment, it's a nice little detail that George subtly does throughout book one perfectly. That's why I think George's best written book is the first book. I think that's a hot take, but yeah. The other thing to note here is that this is not happening like how it is in the show, where it's just happening right in front of the throne or the moon door, I guess. This actually takes place in a garden setting, so statues are getting knocked over during the fight, all that type of stuff. And so we're going to skip the actual fight because it's basically note for note very similar in the way that it's done, and we'll skip to basically afterwards.
I fear I've behaved monstrously the past few weeks.
Yeah, Joffrey. You're always a monster. Look at your eyes.
With your permission.
Oh, the cinematography, by the way. Just that shot right there. Beautiful. But let's just point this out. I had pointed this out in previous episodes. Sansa and Joffrey have already made up. This is not a thing where they need all this, we need to reconcile type idea. The reason D&D need to implement this here is because, Sansa needs to basically argue with Ned sending her back, because she needs to have her love in Joffrey. So they needed to establish that just before, all this shit starts hitting the fan. And so that's the real big thing I wanted to take away from this, is that Sansa already is still in love with Joffrey. That should have basically happened a couple episodes ago.
I'm sending you both back to Winterfell.
What?
Listen.
What about Joffrey?
Are you dying
Yeah.
because of your leg?
What about Joffrey? So we actually missed a little amount here. So Sansa's point of view starts out very differently than this. Sansa, basically directly after when Ned was on the throne, she basically gives her own thoughts. She was at court, she saw everything. And obviously because she's so young, she doesn't think rationally. She's thinking, Ned should have sent Loras because he fits more of the gallant role of being a knight, and he's so handsome. And as this is happening, Littlefinger, being the real weird guy that he is, comes in, and he's getting a little too touchy-feely with Sansa. And he gives her some very maybe you are wise, but that isn't the reasons that I would have sent Loras or whatever. And so there's a lot of that stuff going on. And then at that point, Sansa and Arya then have a dinner / I guess lunch scene. And the scene earlier that we saw back in, I believe it was episode 3, where Arya and Sansa are arguing at the table, and then Arya basically leaves. That is actually what happens here, but just slightly different. So Arya and Sansa get into a fight, and Arya actually throws this orange, and it gets on Sansa's dress and it ruins it. And it gets so bad that Sansa actually utters that she wishes Arya had died instead of Lady. So I really want to point out that the thing that the show does well, but maybe not as well as the book, is that we really hate Sansa. Sansa is a very hateable character in the first book. And it's understandable, though. You can hate Sansa from the perspective of, she's not like Arya or some of these other characters, but she acts very realistically. Sansa is more of a kid than Arya is. Arya acts way more mature for her age. So, for instance, in the book, which we're not going to see here in the show, is she actually apologizes to Sansa. Not necessarily that she's feeling really remorseful for it or anything like that, but she understands that her father is going through a lot. And because of that talk that she had earlier in the book, she actually realizes she needs to make amends with her sister to cause less trouble for Ned. So that is really important there. It kind of paints a different picture of both Sansa and Arya and their developments up to this point of the story. And for the most part, this scene is completely the same as it is in the book. The idea that Ned is going to send them back, Sansa doesn't want to, Arya's kind of okay with it as long as she can keep Syrio Forel. And then when Sansa utters that Joffrey isn't anything like Robert, that is in the book when all the gears start turning. And even in Sansa's chapter, like, she notices that Ned, like, makes a face or something. That's like supposed to be a little cue to pick up, oh, Ned just figured it out. And so in the show, are they going to have another scene that's very accurate to the book?
Lord Oris Baratheon, black of hair. Axel Baratheon, black of hair. Lionel Baratheon, black of
Shout
hair.
out to Lionel Baratheon.
Stefan Baratheon, black of hair.
For people that don't know, that's Stannis and Robert's father. And Renly's.
Joffrey Baratheon, golden head.
Big reveal. It's a bit more complex and nuanced than that in the book, where Ned doesn't just go, oh, well, this Baratheon has black hair, that Baratheon has black hair. He does actually go through their history and look at points where, oh, the Baratheons have been married into other families, but they always still seem to have the black hair. And so he kind of puts two and two together. I think they simplified it for good reason. You didn't really need to go that far, especially when you've already shown the audience that Jaime and Cersei are sleeping together and all that stuff. You don't really need to go that far. So, in my opinion, very good reveal. But let's get into the massive end moment of the episode in Viserys' death, which is just tragic. I do want to set the scene a bit differently here, because in the show, we now dive into this feast. In the book, it's all the ritual stuff, her bathing and her stuff with Drogo, then bam, we're into this scene right here. But another thing of importance is the Dothraki are actually a lot more, I guess, not rich, but there's a lot more people here, I should say. Like, this is a great big hall with a lot of people, not just like, what would you say? There's maybe like 30 or 40 people here. There's a lot more than that. Like, this is like a great hall, like if you were at Winterfell, for instance, or Harrenhal. Not like it's a stone castle or anything like that, but the idea of just the size. So that's a lot of people here. The second thing is Viserys is not here, similar to the show. We learned that he is actually in the markets, as he prefers them to the Dothraki stuff, because there might be people that, well, speak the Westerosi language, have wine from there, all that type of stuff. The point is Viserys is not here. And so at that point, that's then when Viserys is going to come into the hall, and I'll probably pause and play a couple times.
Where's my sister?
Stop him.
So yeah, similar to the show, Viserys stumbles in drunk. And that's where things start to get very interesting. And then also the big thing, and the reason why Daenerys has Jorah go after him, is he has a sword. And you're not supposed to have a sword in Vaes Dothrak. And just to kind of show you how big the area is, Viserys does not instantly spot Daenerys because there's just a sea of people. And Daenerys is very recognizable because of her hair. And so that right away is interesting to show the difference in scale. And obviously it's for budget reasons and all that, but just to kind of tell you the differences.
It's off me. No one touches the dragon.
I'm going to pause again, just because I think this is a very important scene to dive into. Firstly, yes, so Viserys asks, I'm here for the feast, where do I get to sit? And Drogo basically tells him he has a seat basically at the very end of the hall. It'd basically be like where Jon is sitting in Winterfell in the book. And so it's very disrespectful to Viserys, especially because, well, he's the brother to the Khaleesi, and he believes himself to be the king. Everybody should be bowing to him. And another thing that's important to understand, it's not just Khal Drogo and his Khalasar here. There are other Khals here. This is Vaes Dothrak. It's where the Dothraki put aside all of their differences, and they congregate as an entire population or people. And so not only is it Drogo and, like, for instance, in this case, a Blood Rider laughing at him, everyone's laughing at him. Hundreds of people are laughing at him. Viserys is the laughing stock. Also, Drogo calls him the Cart King, and that he has sore feet. There's a lot more here that obviously is going to anger Viserys. And there's a lot of that there. There's a lot more that just adds into the just explosion that happens next.
Khal Drogo! I'm here for the feast!
Back there.
See, like here, that's not that big of a thing.
That is
You're at
no
least
place
in
for
the
a
area.
king.
There's only 30 or 40 people here.
Keep away from me!
Viserys, please.
There she is.
The idea that Viserys didn't see Dany here is kind of funny. I can't play a whole lot of this. I wish I could play the entire scene, but I really want to point out here that Viserys, while being drunk, of course, what's tragic about this character, and I don't want you guys to take this as like I'm saying, oh, Viserys, he's not this horrible guy to Daenerys. He is. It's the way that George writes this character so beautiful, because you see that there is some other guy that could have happened if he didn't turn out the way he did, if he had a different circumstance, if he grew up in a normal life. And what you see here is that Daenerys, because we're in her head, we see that Viserys is in a lot of ways crying. Yes, he is threatening her and he's threatening her child, but you also see that, like, he's visibly kind of confused in terms of his emotions. He's all over the place. And that really plays into this, because Viserys is just so motivated by desperation of getting his crown that he does something that condemns him to die. That's another part of this that the show, I think, misses on. Daenerys is not this person that's kind of just hardcore against Viserys after the events of basically the previous episodes. In her mind, when Jorah tells her that Viserys was planning to steal her dragon eggs, Daenerys doesn't, think about this and go, he was trying to do that? That's terrible. Why would he do that? I hate him. No, she thinks of, if he was going to do that, why didn't he just ask? He could have had them. I would have given them to him. He is my king. He is the king, the rightful heir. That shows you the trauma that Daenerys has gone through. That not only does, yes, she's holding on to Viserys as her last family, but that also she's been so traumatized by her experiences with him that she's still not fully broken out of that loop until Viserys goes one step too far and threatens to kill her child.
You shall have a golden crown that men shall tremble to behold.
Harry Lloyd does such a great job acting here, because this is exactly how the way the book describes it, that he has like this childish like smile and happiness that Daenerys has never seen from him.
Dany, tell them.
You know it's serious when he starts calling her Dany.
Make them. Dany, please!
A crown for a king.
R.I.P. Harry Lloyd. Ah, man. Harry Lloyd is by far maybe one of the best actors of this season and of the show overall. And the only thing I can say differently, usually I would skip scenes like this because they're not all that different from the book. But I guess if there's one little thing I could squeeze in here just to show this amazing scene, is that actually they improve the line, in my opinion, in the show. So in the show they say, a crown for a king. In the book, it's a crown for a cart king. So there's that extra word there that I just don't think it rolls off the tongue as well for the show. And obviously it's a reference to Viserys and him not adapting to the Dothraki culture and him finally getting what was coming to him. Oh, such a beautiful end to episode 6. Again, episode 5 and 6 are some really strong episodes, and I feel like if you were somebody watching the show for the first time and you weren't really hooked in by those first 3 or 4 episodes, episode 5 and 6 is where I feel like the show really starts to get addicting, and just another banger episode. So let's transition into episode 7. So getting into episode 7, I did skip the Tywin introduction just because it's completely not in the book at all. It's something we could have seen happening, but overall I wanted to skip it. So getting to the big moment of the starting of this episode, which is Ned and Cersei's encounter and Ned revealing the truth. It's a bit different in the way that it is structured in the book, where this chapter, there's a little bit of stuff they cut out. Firstly, Ned is getting treatment for his leg by Pycelle. And one thing I really want to point out that I feel like this mainly stems from show watchers and not book readers is Ned is not stupid in the sense of like, he understands politically that like people like Pycelle cannot be trusted, that he's a crony for Cersei. He thinks all of that in his head. He's not somebody who blindly is trusting Varys or Littlefinger. In a lot of ways, Ned is somebody that, as we'll go through this episode, is using people out of necessity, not that he necessarily trusts people. And that's something that I think gets really overblown in the show. And another thing, Littlefinger also does stop in, but it's not relatively that important outside of just Ned has figured out the truth and he thought about telling Littlefinger, but he doesn't still trust him because of the way he holds himself and for obvious reasons. And so that leads then to Ned basically being taken to the Godswood. And very different than what you see on screen right now is, well, it's tough to maybe see because of the tree, but she's dressed normally for the most part with Cersei. In the book, that is not the case. Cersei definitely like tones it down, dresses more plainly because she's trying to appeal to what she believes Ned would find more attractive. And so that's going to be very different than what happens in the show. So let's start out a little bit more with what happens in the scene and I'll break it down a bit more.
You're in pain.
Oh, obvious observation, Cersei.
I've had worse, my lady. I know the truth John Arryn died for.
Do you, Lord Stark? Is that why you called me here, to pose me riddles?
So for the most part, a lot of this is accurate, and again, they take a lot of the dialogue straight from the book for this conversation. The only thing that I want to talk about that I have to just kind of not play the whole clip for is Cersei basically tries to seduce Ned. And by doing so, she's kind of trying to like pose him into this idea of, well, how about you just let Joffrey come after Robert and me and you can basically rule? And that's Cersei's way of trying to defuse the situation. Now, obviously this doesn't work because Ned is very honorable and all of that kind of stuff. Actually throws it back in her face. He asks if she tried to do the same thing with Jon Arryn in terms of trying to seduce him. And obviously Cersei's not very happy about this and she actually slaps Ned. And that's where then some things start to come out about Cersei basically saying, Ned, who are you to be honorable and all this stuff? You slept with another woman. And then she basically names off a bunch of different ideas of who it could be. She's just trying to get a rise out of Ned. And for Ned, it doesn't really work. And so Cersei kind of throws that in his face. And then this whole confrontation plays out kind of similar to the way it does in the show overall. And so let's play the end of the scene and I'll say a little bit more.
Robert's wrath will follow you.
And what of my wrath, Lord Stark?
If you've read A Feast for Crows, you know Cersei's got all that rage.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win.
She said the line! Guys, I've heard that line at least 1,000 times. And so with Cersei's line, I think that overall, they did a very good job of adapting this. There is more there. And one thing I want to talk about, because obviously if you are a show watcher, you're missing some of the context here that you don't have with the books. With the books, Ned is not just an honorable man. Yes, he is that. And that's also what leads him to tell Cersei. That's part of it, right? But in the show, it's mainly driven by that. In the show, it's mainly because Ned is an honorable man, and that's what he believes is right. And he would be correct. And trying to save children is a good thing. But it leads to the route where many show watchers come off as Ned is just a stupid character. Why would he tell her that? You know, honor was the only thing that was playing in Ned's mind. For book readers, especially people that have read the books multiple times, you know that's really not the case. It does have to do with honor, but what's really also at the forefront of Ned's mind, and George makes it very apparent when you read his thoughts, is Ned is constantly thinking of Lyanna and this promise that he made her. He's constantly reminded by it by the way Robert acts about killing Daenerys and an unborn child. And now here he's faced with the same situation. He could warn Cersei and save children from being killed, like the end of Robert's rebellion during the sack of King's Landing. And all of that is playing into Ned's mind. Ned is traumatized by the death of his sister and what followed if R+L is correct. He is somebody that, yes, is honorable, but he has a personal bias. His own personal experiences is what molds him to tell Cersei out of mercy, out of experience for what has happened in his life. And that to me is so relevant because all of that is true, right? He has personal bias, he has honor. But what other people do not understand about this situation is we only think that Ned screwed up here because Robert died when he did. If Robert had just killed the boar, or maybe he had a little bit less wine, or maybe he hadn't ordered everyone around him to let him have a go at the boar, then this situation would be completely different. Cersei, their kids, they'd all be dead. But that is something Ned cannot predict. That is with hindsight. So Ned has all the chips here. As long as Robert survives, Ned is fine. Ned has nothing to necessarily be worried about outside of like Cersei poisoning him or something along those lines, because she can't really make a move. If she publicly was to attack Ned and something like that, Robert would have her killed. So as long as Robert's alive, Ned is safe. And that is the premise that Ned is working under. I just think that's really relevant. And if you're somebody that hasn't read the book, I would really recommend reading the books because they really paint the way we view Ned very differently. So before we get any further, I did want to just point out I skipped a good amount of stuff in the first portion of this episode because a lot of it's just added scenes that there's not really much to talk about. In terms of things they left out from the books, one thing I'll say about the Littlefinger scene that happens directly after Cersei and Ned's confrontation, which it's him, if you don't remember, him in his brothel with the prostitutes, and he's telling a lot of his backstory and his motivations. And I can't talk about that, obviously, because there's stuff that you can't see on screen for YouTube. But I'll say this about that scene. I actually don't like that scene. I actually think, for me, that is my least favorite scene. One, because it's super awkward to watch with anyone, like when you're just around someone watching the show for the first time. Two, it is like a massive, like, oh, Littlefinger's gonna betray Ned this episode type scene. So I don't really like it. I'm kind of surprised George didn't pick out that scene to be the one that was his least favorite, but whatever. But either way, with Robert now, so now we sped up a little bit. With Robert's death and this whole sequence, it's very much on the nose, like word for word from the book. The major differences is actually going to be coming after Robert's, not death, because he doesn't die here, but this is the last time we see him. We'll talk about that here, but I do want to just give Mark Addy, as this is his final scene, a little bit of time for you guys to reflect on, I guess, or just look at how brilliant his performance is.
The girl. Daenerys. You were right.
A little too late, Robert.
Littlefinger, my brother, worthless.
So again, farewell to Mark Addy. Did a brilliant job playing the character. Another thing I guess you could throw in here that's different is Robert actually questions what his legacy is going to be. He even compares himself to being as bad or as worse as Aerys. And Ned, in a nice little moment, tells him, no, not that bad. Maybe not a great king, but not as bad as Aerys. And so it's like a nice little moment. And Robert, I feel like, as most people do, are thinking about how they're going to be remembered. So it's just a nice little touch in the book that's not really there in the show. But overall, a great send-off for Robert Baratheon. So, big change. Let's go ahead and stop it right here. So a lot of the Daenerys stuff is interesting because it actually like caught up with itself by episode 6. Like the timeline was kind of synced up again. And then in episode 7, they're like, hey, we need some material to fill out some of Ned's stuff so it's not just one long Ned episode. And so they picked up Daenerys' stuff. Now, in the book, what actually occurs is we see Ned's storyline interspliced with, like, for instance, Jon and some other stuff in there. Here, they're using Daenerys. Now, Daenerys actually is around 70 to 80 pages from when we get a lot of the events happening in this episode. So it's a kind of going back to the earlier episodes of the season where I talked about how Daenerys' timeline's all kind of screwed up. Like, for instance, we see Ned's coup, and then like the beginning of the stuff of episode 8 where we see the fallout of that, like Arya's reaction, Bran's reaction, Sansa's reaction, Jon's reaction. We see all of that before we ever jump back to Daenerys. And so here they're kind of intersplicing that in here to try and redirect, okay, where's Daenerys going now in the last 4 episodes? Whereas I feel like George more backloads her chapters. A lot more of her storyline, it kind of takes a break for the King's Landing while it's all heating up. And it kind of feels like two separate stories in the book. It feels like the Viserys story, and then when we jump back, and it's funny because there are also 5 chapters, and 5 chapters for her 10 is Viserys in those first 5, and then post Viserys. And so you take a break in the middle of that. But yeah, so with Daenerys, I'm not going to talk about her much in this episode because a lot of this is very faithful. Daenerys trying to get Drogo to go to Westeros. He denies that, and he needs something to push him to do that. And that's what kind of comes through this episode.
I'm afraid I am not
Come
worthy
on,
of the
drink the
vintage.
wine, dude.
Besides, it is a poor wine merchant who would drink up his own wares.
You will.
Hey, wine is fantastic. It's very weird how they actually adapted this scene. So just to add more tension for what George wrote versus the show, in the book, what actually occurs here is the vendor actually throws the wine cask at Daenerys. And so that is interesting because it makes Jorah push her out of the way, but that makes her fall down. And if she would have fallen directly on the baby, that could have led to a miscarriage, and that would have been a really big point. So that's the only real difference. All this happens the exact same.
At all. It does not matter. All
you tell him,
that
Jor.
Is in the past.
Here, this guy's face in the front is
on
so
the wall.
funny. This guy, right here. This guy. Okay, we're going to pause it on his face because his posture, I'm one to talk about posture, and just the way he looks is just so funny. It gets me every time I watch this season. But there's a lot to talk about with Jon's storyline. For book readers, you know, they cut out quite a lot. But with Jon, they basically almost cut out like 2 chapters worth of stuff. So there's a major plot point running where Samwell, who now has become a brother, a friend to Jon, and he's been indoctrinated into their little group. So the next thing that George does with those characters is he goes, well, they're all going to move on. So Gren's going to become a ranger. Daeron's going to get shipped over to Eastwatch. You know, somebody's going to be a steward or a builder or whatever. But Samwell doesn't graduate. So Samwell is still going to be in training with Alistair Thorne. And this poses a massive issue because Jon is not there to protect him. You know, he's going to have his own duties. He's not going to be there to protect Sam all the time. And so what Sam realizes is that he's probably going to die. Alistair Thorne is going to keep putting him up against these things, and eventually he's going to get beaten to death to where he's not going to be able to survive. And so that's a huge point of one of Jon's chapters. And so what does Jon do? And one of my favorite moments of the first book is Jon actually goes to Maester Aemon. And he goes and convinces him that Samwell would actually be of great use to him. He knows how to read and write, something that not a lot of people know how to do, and he would be great for Aemon. And there's a lot of good stuff here because the way that Jon convinces Aemon is a really clever way. He tells Aemon that, like the metals that they forge, everyone has their use or whatnot, and Samwell fits into that perfectly. And the other thing is it also sets up Chet, who will be a very big antagonist, or not big, but he's an antagonist to Samwell specifically, and I guess Jon as well, when we get to A Storm of Swords, as he is the actual prologue character. So again, they never do the Chet character in the show, so I guess it's fine. But from the book perspective, it's actually quite a big chapter, in my opinion. And then the other part of this is the major difference, I guess, would be that Samwell is supposedly not supposed to be graduating. So like all the other people around him, like Gren and Pip, they're all like, whoa, why is Sam here? He's graduating too? All that kind of stuff. And then there'll be another thing we'll talk about after this all happens.
Samuel, you will assist me in the rookery and library.
So first big thing to note,
you will report
we
to
actually get
Marsh
introduced
in
to
the
Bowen
kitchens.
Marsh in the book for this scene with Jon.
See what they're doing? I see Sir Alistair's revenge, that's all. He wanted it and he got it. Stewards are nothing but maids. I'm a better swordsman and rider than any of you. It's not fair.
Fair?
So this is all similar to the book, almost word for word. The only difference, once again, is this is Daeron and not Pip in this scene. So Daeron's the one that utters like, oh, you know, so you're so much better than us and all this stuff. It's interesting because it actually has a nice payoff to book 4 when Sam is with Daeron and we see how that shakes up between the two characters. I won't spoil it if you want to read the books, but it is interesting. It's interesting now, like when I'm, watching the show and I just see those little like things they cut out. That's like, it's interesting because they do have like little mini ripple effects for later on, because now you don't have the character of Daeron. You don't have the little moments that we have with the character that when we get back to the character, 3 or 4 books from now, it's a much more like easier transition of, oh yeah, I remember this guy from book 1 and the personality there. Just a little interesting note. It's not anything crazy in season 1, but I did want to point that out overall. All right, Renly, what you got to say?
He named you Protector of the Realm.
He did.
Astute observation.
Strike! Tonight while the castle sleeps. We must get Joffrey away from his mother and into our custody. Protector of the Realm will know he who holds the king holds the kingdom.
Okay, let's stop right there. As of right now, the book and the show add up. That is what Renly tells Ned. Renly tells him, okay, let's strike when everybody's, asleep, and self-preservation, all that kind of stuff. It makes sense from that point of view for Renly, that he understands his life is in danger as Robert is dying and Cersei will want to take him out. And that is true. That is what Cersei had planning. So Renly is very intelligent. This makes sense from his point of view. But that's not where this scene ends.
What's best for the people we rule? We all know what Stannis is. He inspires no love or loyalty. He's not a king. I am.
So let's talk about that for a second. Like I said, the book basically ends this conversation with Ned going, no, he will not go and take kids from their mother in the middle of the night. Again, it's reinforced by Ned's personal bias and his honor. His personal experiences have shaped him to not want to do that very thing that Renly is suggesting. So it makes perfect sense from both parties as to why they are doing the thing they are doing. Renly in the show, to me, is where we start to get the season 2 issues. So firstly, Stannis is basically never mentioned in the television show up to this point. So this is when he's finally like introduced as this character. It's like, oh, okay, so Stannis is the person that should come next. Got it. We don't really know much about Stannis at this point, but now Renly is kind of claiming, oh, people don't like Stannis, any of that. I think the problem with that change is we haven't really heard anything about Stannis, so we don't know, we don't have this preconceived idea of who Stannis could be. Whereas in the book, it's very much established at this point and foreshadowed who he is from the perspective of people like Littlefinger, Ned, whoever. Here, you're introducing Stannis and Renly is using the idea that he should be king. We don't really know who Stannis is yet. So I do think this was actually not a change I liked. I don't like the idea of Renly openly trying to say he should be king when trying to use Ned to take over, right? Because the idea, if you're Renly, is why would Ned ever allow you to be king? You know who Ned is. Everybody at King's Landing knows the kind of guy Ned is. What you're trying to do is breaking all the laws of Westeros. Why would Ned ever back you? So I don't really like this because I think it dumbs down the character of Renly. I also think it makes him a little less clever and whiny. So I'm not a fan of this change overall. I can understand why they did it, because they had very much underdeveloped the characters of Renly and Stannis, and they are basically 2 of the most important characters going into the next season. And this will obviously be the last time we see Renly for season 1. I didn't really like the way they did this overall. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. But let's continue on.
When the Queen proclaims one king and the Hand proclaims another, whose peace do the gold cloaks protect? The man who pays them.
So there's some missing stuff there. For the most part, they got that dialogue spot on from the book, and the actors do a fantastic job there. But I really want to emphasize the thing that makes Ned have to trust Littlefinger is because Ned's out of options. Ned did not take Renly's advice. He didn't take the Lannister kids in the middle of the night. And he does not have the men because his men have basically been trickling down. He used some men to help with the gold cloaks and keeping the peace. He used some to go bring Gregor the Mountain to justice. He's lost his men because he spread them kind of thinly, and you also have Jory being killed and some of his other men because of Jaime. He cannot rely on just his fighting force. He has less men than the Lannisters. So what is the key? He needs the gold cloaks. And at this point, Ned has two options. It's the reason my favorite chapter for Ned is actually that chapter where all the planning is happening for Ned's coup, because it's the last time Ned has a choice. It's the last time Ned can try and survive. He has two options. It's fight or flight. He can trust Littlefinger is going to deliver the gold cloaks, or he can flee. Those are his only options. He's backed himself into a corner because of Robert's death. That was basically his shield. And at this point, he's kind of making a roll of the dice. And so I do think that is important to understand. Also, the other thing with Littlefinger is Littlefinger, when he's delivering that scene, he also goes a little bit further. There's a little bit more of that foreshadowing that Littlefinger is going to play Ned. He's going to betray him, because he says to Ned that you know what you want me to do, but even now you can't say it. Your honor is not something that protects you, it holds you down. And that Littlefinger says he should make Ned say it just for the fun of it, just to antagonize him, but he doesn't. All the pieces are there, especially in the book. And yes, in the show, they did that scene that really gives away the twist. The book, there's a lot of stuff there to go, this Littlefinger guy, he ain't it. And also, we're going to just skip all of this, what you see on screen of the Jon and Sam saying their vows and discovering the hand and all that stuff, because that is just straight kind of from the book. There's not really much to say about it. Holy cow, Jason Momoa's acting, so good. So I did show this, but let's move on. And here it comes.
All is accomplished. The city watch is yours.
Good.
Let's pause it here. There's a couple things that happen before they actually go to confront Cersei, more or less. And so Robert dies, and Ned finds this out. And so basically he calls all of the council members to the Tower of the Hand. He summons Barristan, Littlefinger, Varys. The people that should be there are there, besides Renly and Stannis. Now, obviously, Stannis has not been there the entire book, and Renly, well, he leaves in the middle of the night. But at this point, Ned basically is just asking them to confer him as the Lord Protector. Now, he knows in the back of his mind there's going to be this confrontation. Cersei is going to call for him at some point. And so at that point, Barristan and the rest of the counselors then go to where Cersei and Joffrey are, on the Iron Throne. And another thing to note, like I mentioned, Barristan has already, been with Ned this whole time. He has actually read the letter that Robert basically had Ned write. So he knows what's in it already. So we don't have this whole thing where Ned goes to the throne, hands it to Cersei, and Barristan reads it and all that stuff. That doesn't happen in the book. Another thing I will note, I don't remember if it's in this chapter or the chapter before. I'm pretty sure it's the chapter before, maybe. But Ned has a dream where he's in the crypts of Winterfell, and he remembers again that promise that he made to Lyanna. So just a nice little note. They very much cut out his dreams in this season, and, well, he doesn't go any further than this, so they cut out them as a whole.
Kill him!
Kill them all!
Commander! Take the Queen and her children into custody.
No!
R.I.P. Ned.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Ned made a gamble and it did not pay off. And this is really accurate. The only major difference is Barristan comes in with Ned. He's not like protecting Joffrey. He's not theoretically against Ned. And I didn't play much of this because, again, we're trying to avoid copyright. But for the most part, it's really accurate. Ned goes into the throne room and he has this confrontation with Cersei. He presents Robert's last words. She tears them up. And then the confrontation happens. There's no major difference. Maybe you could say Myrcella was also here because when Ned questions that Joffrey is not the rightful heir, there is some of that questioning there with Myrcella. But overall, it's basically exactly how it goes down. It's one of the best scenes of season 1, of course, because it's Ned's coup. It's this huge, big twist. It's done beautifully. So that gets us through episode 7. With episode 7, I feel like there was a lot more added scenes, and so there wasn't as much to talk about. And then a lot of the scenes in this episode actually were quite faithful to the book. So maybe a shorter episode in terms of the things that were changed. But that gets us into episode 8 and the final 3 of the season.
Perfectly well we were to leave today. How she could forget it, she didn't forget.
So, getting into episode 8, our first big change. I did skip a little bit of Arya's lesson before Maren Trant gets there, but this is the first big change because within the book, Sansa does not have this moment where she's kind of walking with Mordain and she's told to run to her room. They actually cut a very significant thing from Sansa's arc in the book. So going all the way back to episode 6, Sansa's arguing with Ned about not wanting to go back to Winterfell. She loves Joffrey. Well, in the book, she goes a step further. She actually goes to tell Cersei of Ned's plan. Sansa basically hoping that Cersei will keep her there and not make her leave and go to Winterfell. That actually ends up backfiring quite a lot because this actually informs Cersei of Ned's plan and him basically going to make a move very soon. So that speeds up her internal clock of, okay, I need to make the first move. And then the other thing that's changed here is Cersei basically has control of Sansa. Knowing that Ned is going to make a move, he takes control of Sansa. Kind of similar to what like Renly was trying to do with Ned about taking the Lannister kids into custody. It's kind of what Cersei does. So it's a double whammy. And so Sansa's not in this situation. And so what ends up happening is she's locked in her room. And then eventually Jane Poole gets thrown into her room. This was not supposed to actually happen because Cersei and the Small Council wouldn't have wanted Sansa to be knowing what's happening. They want to spin the narrative and the tale and then use Sansa. So basically, Sansa and Jane Poole spend a couple days together before eventually she's summoned by Cersei. And we'll see how that plays out a little bit later. And yeah, they changed a lot here with Sansa in terms of she comes off as a lot more unlikable in the book because of betraying Ned, albeit she didn't necessarily know that's what she was doing. And Ned, if he had been a bit more open with his daughters about what he was planning and why he was sending them home, could have avoided this situation. But either way, the show kind of cut that whole thing out.
Be gone now, Arya.
Come with me. Run.
The first
The sword of Bravos does not run. I did just want to play that because I just think it's pretty badass, and it's the last time we see Syrio in the rest of the show. But this whole scene with Syrio and Arya is very accurate, so we're not going to play too much of it. So let's move on, and we're going to get to the next major difference, which will come with Arya's storyline as well. Not a pretty sight. But I'll just say this with Arya, because the show also cuts off some of Arya's chapter, is Arya, so after she leaves Syrio, Arya basically needs to find a way to get away. She's trying to find a way out of the castle and then the city. And so at this point, we see her actually have to do a number of things outside of just arriving at the stables. She has to basically take all the lessons that she's learned from Syrio and act like she's not someone important or that she's not bothered by what's happening. She has to act completely normal because there's gold cloaks all over the walls. And so Arya at this point has to face her fears, and she walks completely in the wide open, basically. Not fully, but she does have a lot of bravery to walk past all these gold cloaks and try to get away. So they do cut off, I think, a lot of her, I would say, growth, because she kind of has a lot of major payoffs with her teachings in this chapter and the next one, and they do kind of cut that off to just go, oh, you know, she's now arrived at the stables. And so I'll play the rest of it, and then we'll have another kind of difference that happens here as well.
Leave me be. My father's a lord. He'll reward you. She'll reward me. The queen.
This guy really thought he was doing something. To be fair to this kid, though, who expects a little girl to randomly have an actual sword and then stab you with it? To be fair to him. I will say another thing they do cut out here is actually there's, you know, the Stark guards that you can kind of see on the ground when this scene's happening. And Arya, in her anger and her frustration, she ends up kicking Desmond, one of the guards that Ned has. And Desmond is the person that escorts her when Yoren is trying to talk to Ned privately about Catelyn taking Tyrion. Desmond is the one that tells Arya that like 10 southern men are worth 1 northern man. And so Arya actually kicks his dead body and calls him a liar because, well, she only sees 1 Lannister body and a bunch of Stark men. So it also shows how young Arya still is, the frustration and all that. But I think they do cut out a lot of Sansa and Arya's stuff here to open up episode 8. I'm not sure why, outside of maybe pacing reasons, but let's continue. Ned, you darn goofed up. Why couldn't you have just... I don't know. You should have done so many different things.
Lord Stark.
Oh my gosh, it's Varys. So let's pause right here. A lot of book readers know this right away. This is actually one of the best chapters in the entire series, especially for Ned. I'd say it's one of his better ones. For most people, this might even be their favorite. But Ned's last chapter in A Game of Thrones actually happens a lot later than when it's being shown in the show. In the show, they kind of split his last chapter into two. One of them happens in the beginning of episode 8 with this scene with Varys, but then we're also going to get another scene with Varys at the beginning of episode 9. So they kind of took his chapter and split it in half, and because we're not in Ned's head, we don't really get a full extent of what's happening to Ned in the Black Cells. It is horrible. He's living in basically complete darkness. His leg injury is killing him. He's not getting proper medical support for it because obviously he's a prisoner accused of treason. And at this point, he kind of feels like he's going insane. He's going in and out of sleep the entire time. He's not even sure what's real anymore. He's not sure like if what he's thinking is him actually thinking or him dreaming. He thinks a lot of the events of Robert's rebellion. There's a lot of foreshadowing the things that happened then. And then Varys shows up and is in another disguise. He's dressed up as like a jailer, more or less. And a lot of that conversation is interesting. It's very similar to what's shown in the show, so I'm not going to play too much of it. It's just split into half. But basically, this chapter happens directly after Sansa goes and begs for her father's life, because it's a natural then payoff to that where you have Ned. What is Ned going to do? Is he going to actually accept Cersei's offer or not? And the thing that gets him to turn is, well, Sansa's life is kind of thrown up there by Varys. The thing that Ned has been dealing with in the books the entire time is the trauma of his past. I've talked about this a lot in the last few episodes, is him and how he believes children should always be left out of these things because of, well, Robert's rebellion and now what he's experienced with Robert. So a lot of that plays into his decision of why he then tries to take Cersei's deal, and that then doesn't go that well. So we're going to skip, for the most part, this like scene because it's very accurate to the book, just outside of we don't have the full context of being in Ned's head.
Your father has proved to be an awful
What an
traitor.
iconic scene. Imagine being Sansa
King
dealing with all these
Robert's
people.
body was still warm when Lord Eddard began plotting to steal Joffrey's rightful throne.
Let's stop it right there. So the first thing that's very different here is in the show, they kind of have it where the Hound basically picks up Sansa and then she's then delivered straight to Cersei. And then they try to basically blackmail her into this letter, all that stuff, and manipulate her. In the book, like I said, it's very different. It takes 3 days for her to be summoned by Cersei. And then also the big difference here that they completely exclude, which does have a ripple to later on in the story when we talk about Sansa's plot all the way into season 5, is Jane Poole is not really a character. So in the show, you kind of can maybe just assume she died at some point during either being at King's Landing. I'm not even sure we ever see her in season 1 after like the first initial episode, so who knows if she's even in Winterfell, who knows. But either way, the point of it being that Jane Poole is given over to Littlefinger, and we know later on Jane Poole will basically be used to be this fake Arya to marry to Ramsay to help the Boltons have legitimacy over the North. So that doesn't happen because, well, it's never established in season 1. So that is a little ripple there if you want to look at some of them, but very minor exclusion here. But for the actual point of this scene of Sansa being manipulated by the council, very accurate overall as well. Oh, one of my favorite added scenes from the show.
Sansa wrote this.
It is your sister's hand, but the Queen's words. You're summoned to King's
Good
Landing
comms from
to
Lewin.
swear fealty to the new king.
His Grace summons me to King's Landing. I'll go to King's Landing. But not alone.
W Rob. Can we get W Robs
Call
in the
banners.
chat?
You afraid?
One of the best scenes in the entire first season.
It must be.
Good.
Let's stop it right there. So we just got through a lot of material that is never in the books. Now, it's all implied to have happened in the books, of course. In the last Bran chapter, this is all implied. Theon and Robb have already had these conversations, and they've kind of told that to Bran that maybe we should call the banners. Ned has been attacked in the streets. And so all of this has already been foreshadowed by the time we get to Bran's chapter after Ned's coup. But with Bran's chapter, we start out instantly, all the men are already at Winterfell, outside of the Karstarks who have just arrived. So Bran is watching them arrive. Robb has already been the host of all these different lords. We're a little behind in terms of where the book is versus where the show is with the northern storyline. But the reason I love this scene so much is because with Robb, we just don't see his vulnerability nearly enough in the first season. And part of that is because they aged up the character. But like I've referenced in past episodes, there's a scene that's brilliant, and probably my favorite of Bran's entire storyline is Robb basically comes to Bran one night, and he's overcome with all the things he's having to deal with. Catelyn's not there, Ned's not there, and he breaks down crying. And you see with Bran and the way he views Robb is that Robb is playing two people, Robb the Lord and Robb his brother, and he's becoming more and more of Robb the Lord. And you see that vulnerability throughout Bran and Catelyn's chapters throughout the first book specifically. And so this scene does a very good job of showing that Robb is not just this stoic guy that's going to lead the army. He has doubts. Now, we're going to get back to this storyline, and that's not going to be present when it is present in the book. So I just think it's a little bit of like D&D weren't sure how to do the vulnerability side of Robb because he was a little bit more aged up, whereas in the book, he's only 15 years old, and he's at the head of an army. So that's a big part of it. The other thing that we're going to get back to with Robb's storyline, because we're going to get some more additional scenes, just note that they also cut a lot of how Bran is feeling internally, and you could still do it in the show, but Bran consistently sees like Karstark men, or whenever he's at feasts, men look at him in a different light. They pity him. He sees that in their eyes. And as somebody that has some physical issues, I have spine issues for a lot of you that probably know, I see that as well. So there's one of those elements to Bran that even though he's not the most important character as of this first book, especially, and the most interesting, it's those elements that I wish they did keep from the book. But overall, this is one of those great scenes from season 1.
You've had this since dawn.
Okay, so this scene is so much worse in the show than it is the book, just based on, not like actually bad, but I mean like the context of Lysa keeping this information from Catelyn is the craziest part, because I talked about this in the book. We've already seen this. They've kind of reused this scene and kind of changed it up. So in the book, we don't see Catelyn again until Moat Cailin. The next time we see her, she's with the White Harbor men going to Robb, who already has unified this whole army. So again, we're very much behind where the book is versus the show. But in the show, what the scene is, so I don't have to play it all out for you guys, is that Catelyn has just received news of Ned being imprisoned. That doesn't happen like that. They basically took that scene in the book that I talked about in previous episodes, where Catelyn is getting all this information that war is starting in the Riverlands and the situation with Edmure and Hoster, and Lysa does nothing. Brynden gets really pissed off and all that stuff. So they're basically recycling that scene and just putting it here to be like Lysa and Catelyn's breakup. But just know that in the book, this has already happened, and Catelyn is already on a boat leaving the Eyrie.
I'm going to die. May as well be with a song in my heart.
Just for context, this entire conversation happens at the campfire, not like when they're walking like this.
Gold, women, golden women. Stick with me and you'll have them all.
Hell yeah,
Peter Dinklage. As long as I'm around and not a moment longer. Whatever their price, I'll beat it. I like living.
I like living too, Tyrion. It's a good time. So we're going to have to stop it right there, because a lot of you book readers, I feel like there's a lot I feel like in episode 8 they have just cut out. I don't know why, but there's a big one here. So with this scene in the book, it's kind of a similar like setup, except the campfire they're at right now is where they do all of their talking, and especially what Tyrion has been vocalizing to Bronn about why Bronn fought for him and all that stuff. But we get a very additional moment here that is very vital to the story. We actually learn about Tyrion and his first wife, Tysha. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story here because I think there's another moment we can talk about it in the next episode that might be better, but just know that they decided to cut out a pivotal point of Tyrion's story in this scene. And why that is so important is it sets up the conflict that's about to happen between Tywin and Tyrion in the coming books. And so just to give you the spark notes, Tyrion loses his virginity to this woman named Tysha. They end up getting married, and for a little while they live as like husband and wife. But then at that point, Tywin finds out, and he makes Jaime basically tell Tyrion that it was all a lie, it was all a setup. And then he has basically the castle garrison have sex with Tysha, give her a coin, and then make Tyrion go last. That was the spark notes of the story. But then Bronn tells Tyrion that he would kill the man that did that to him. And Tyrion basically implies you may get the chance. So it's just to set up how horrible that relationship between the two is and to foreshadow Tyrion eventually killing Tywin. And so there's a lot there that is missing here that I think is vital. And unfortunately, we'll see they never do the Tysha storyline, and it really started all the way back in episode 8 of season 1. Get him, Jon. Get him. Get him. Come on, get him. That was a pretty cool squirrel. Oh, I didn't get him good. So that was a little interesting what we just saw there. So, as you guys saw, basically Jon grabs this oil lamp, or lantern, whatever you want to say, and he throws it at the other. Now, that is kind of what he does in the book, but there's a lot of things missing here. First thing missing is he doesn't throw the oil, like, lantern or whatever at the other. He throws it at the drapes so that they would catch fire quickly. Like, they wouldn't catch fires easily just throwing it on someone. So he throws it on the drapes, then he takes the drapes and, like, throws it over the other. And that actually gives his hand, like, really bad, severe burns to the point where they still are a factor even all the way up until book 5, where he has to flex his hand to make sure he's getting circulation and making sure it heals up properly. In the show, that's never heard from again. Like, this burns in his hand, like the little that Jon or Kit Harington does not matter going forward. He never has those injuries. So that was the only main difference that I saw here throughout Jon's storyline in this episode. So I did skip a good amount of Jon's stuff outside of this moment because it's the only real big difference, I would say. But let's continue on. Gotta love the Dothraki pillaging everything. And there's the good old horrors of war. So let's talk about this real quick. There's only one major difference in terms of this set piece here, outside of the fact that, again, the show is ahead of the book. This is like the only time I say that, because in reality, for the most of the other plot lines, the show is actually behind the books. But with this, obviously Drogo needs to start raiding, taking slaves, taking their valuables so that he can buy a fleet to then go to Westeros, because that is what he has said he's going to do. But the thing that actually happens here that's different is in the show, Drogo just kind of takes out the Lazarian people and takes some slaves, all that kind of stuff. He takes an injury because of a fight we're going to see coming up. But in the book, that doesn't happen. What actually happens is Drogo, in the middle of another Khalasar that was actually at the feasting at Vaes Dothrak when Daenerys and co were there, he is the one doing this. And then Khal Drogo comes in, he takes out their Khal and even his son, takes over their Khalasar, and then reaps the rewards of what the other Khalasar was doing. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you have the poor people of this village, then you have one Khalasar unrelated to Daenerys, then you have Drogo's Khalasar coming in, and he just kind of destroys it all. So they kind of boiled it down a little bit, which I don't blame them for. And also, they didn't have the budget to like show an actual battle, which you would kind of have to show for Drogo's injuries. So we're going to skip a little bit of this because I can't show much of this on screen, especially with some sexual things coming up. But we'll skip to Drogo and Dany's meeting a little bit later in the episode. You tell him, Dany. Hell yeah, Khaleesi. Hell yeah. God, Jason Momoa is so good in this role. All right, that's a great place to pause it, because as badass as this scene is, and it's just awesome to see Jason Momoa just playing this character amazing, none of this happens. Drogo has already taken his injuries. That's actually what prompts Daenerys to go see him, is that he's taken an arrow wound, and then he also has, like, his nipple has been cut off. So he has 2 different injuries in, like, his chest, and I think it's his shoulder is where he has the arrow wound at. And so that is what eventually then prompts Mirri Maz Duur to step up, because Daenerys has saved her, all that stuff. She actually has a little bit more of an in-depth backstory, that she's basically trained at Asshai and actually has maybe met Marwyn. Who knows? But that is why Mirri then is prompted to heal Khal Drogo. And so that is the major difference. This whole fight doesn't happen. The one thing that does happen is that Daenerys and her rivalry with Khal Drogo's Blood Riders does start to creep up, because they're not going to openly go against Drogo because they fear him and all of that. But they are starting to say, like, if anything happens to Drogo, it ain't looking good for you, Daenerys. So that starts to build up, and that becomes very relevant as we get into the next couple episodes.
Lamb or lion, his wound must be washed and sewn, or it will fester.
So that is all kind of true. What we end up seeing is Mirri gives him like this patchwork of, like, I think it's like mud or leaves or something like that. I don't remember exactly. It's something along that to cover up his chest wound where, like, his nipple has been cut open. And then she also takes the arrow wound out and properly, it would appear, like, fixes all of his problems. But one thing they leave out in the show is it actually would appear that in the show, Mirri actively, like, poisoned Drogo, or actively made it to where he fell apart, more or less. In the book, that's not the case. In the book, it seems like Mirri gave him proper health care, because she does fix him up, it would appear, based on what we see. But the thing that she tells him is that he, for one, needs to leave on this patchwork, or it might get infected. And 2, he's not supposed to drink milk of the poppy or wine for, like, the pain or anything like that. So that, I guess, his immune system can help fight if there is any infection or whatnot, and help him recover. And as we're going to see later on, he doesn't listen to that. So it seems a lot more practical in the book as to why he succumbed to all of it, that he just didn't follow, basically, his doctor telling him what to do. But we'll get a lot more into that as Daenerys' storyline progresses.
Root you out of your keep and hang you for an oathbreaker.
W Rob again. Can we get a W Rob?
Is it? Summer boy, so green he pisses grass.
That's a good insult. That's a good place to pause it on. I will say this. What was Theon going to do? You see Theon reach for his sword. The great Jon would have carved him up like butter. But I'll say this. We don't actually see any of this in the book. We hear about it. Like, Robb tells Bran what happened. But we don't see any of it. We learn how Robb was so scared about this encounter or whatnot. And we also hear a lot more about the other lords, like Roose Bolton, and how all these lords seem to want something from Robb. And that's something that in the book, Bran is a lot more of a focus in Robb's story. It's not really Robb's point of view. Whereas in the show, they very much switch it up and make Robb the point of view, and Bran is just kind of like an afterthought for the most part. Yo, Robb, Bran's trying to get some sleep. Come on, man.
What's happened?
It's all right.
Can't I come with you? I can ride now. You've seen me riding.
Bran, what are you going to do in the middle of a war?
There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Until I return, that will be you.
Yeah, Robb, you're surely going to return.
You are not to leave. But if you don't hear from me, don't be scared.
Oh, you'll hear from him. Red Wedding, everybody knows about that.
Till I return.
Till I return. Well, I'm going to be waiting a long time. So I'll say this about this scene as well. It's a lot more of Robb showing his vulnerability. Here, he seems a lot more stoic, again, saying he's going to return and, you know, all this stuff. Again, in the book, this is when we hear about some of the stuff Robb's been dealing with the other Northern Lords, including the great Jon Umber. But here we see how Robb is really scared of Roose Bolton. The whole time he's talking to him or even like looking at him, he thinks of the rumors of the Dreadfort. And so I just think that the book does a better job of like, oh, who are the supporting characters in the North plot line that's going to be very important going forward. Whereas the show goes for more of a Robb is becoming this stoic leader that really doesn't show his emotions much. And he's not the vulnerable 15-year-old trying to lead an army. So it's just a different vibe when you look at the book to the show. Catelyn's back. Big first difference, we've got to say that Catelyn arrives basically with an army and or an escort. She doesn't just arrive with Roderick. She took a boat all the way from the Vale all the way to White Harbor. Then from there, she had some Manderley men come with her, and then she arrives at Robb's camp, similar to the way this is shown, but just very different context. She also has the Blackfish with her, who obviously is not present.
The River Lords are falling back, with Jaime Lannister at their heels. And Lord Tywin is bringing round a second Lannister army from the south. Our scouts confirm it's even larger than the Kingslayers.
One army or...
Let's talk about this really quickly. In the show, they just kind of imply the River Lords are falling apart. In the book, at this point, we already know that Edmure has completely screwed up at this point. River Run is under a siege. Edmure has been captured. All the rest of the remaining River Lords have been scattered and are being swallowed up by either Tywin or Jaime. The Riverlands at this point are a complete mess. The only two houses that are either not decided or actively opposing the Lannisters is House Mallister and then also the twins. But the twins, they're just not going to act on their own. What's really important about those two houses is that when Robb decides to basically go southwest towards River Run at the crossing, it is important that the Mallisters are still on Robb's side because that's the only major castle that they have to pass to get to River Run. So that allows for them to largely attack Jaime without really being seen, especially with, the Blackfish who's given control of all these different outriders and being able to screen their movements, all that kind of stuff. So I think that the show just kind of generally just says, oh yeah, Jaime's a threat in more of the western side of the Riverlands and Tywin's also in the eastern side, and maybe the thought process right now at this meeting is he might try to go up north towards Moat Cailin, but it's unlikely that Tywin would do that. He's not that stupid. But he's the army that is really looking to attack Robb while Jaime deals with the River Lords.
Mother.
Robb, don't act like the boy. You're in front of your lords.
You look well.
Boy, this is awkward.
Catelyn.
I had not thought to be here.
If you would have just gone home,
I would speak with
none
my
of this would
son
have been a
alone.
problem, Catelyn.
I know you will forgive me, my lords.
And then it's on to the Red Keep to free Ned.
Right. Bring Ned.
John. You're not wasting
Right. How cute. A nice little scene between Robb and Catelyn before all the things go to hell. Look how proud she looks.
Now I find you leading a host to war.
There was no one else.
No.
Okay, let's just stop this scene here because I don't want to go any further. But the big difference in this scene is with Robb at Moat Cailin, he's in a situation where he feels very indecisive. He's basically being given 3 different types of advice. One is to go confront Tywin. The second is to go to confront Jaime to try and rally the River Lords at River Run. And the third is to just stay put and basically throw back any host that attacks Moat Cailin. And there's problems with all 3. Because on one hand, if he goes one way, he can basically be pincered in by the other if they go all the way around, and he can't ever get back to the north. If he stays at Moat Cailin, well, they don't really have the resources, and also, the longer you wait, the issue is you've called all these men to go south who are basically accepting they are maybe going to die. Now you're just stopping at Moat Cailin. It also kind of makes you look indecisive and weak. So what does Catelyn tell Robb here that's so important is that Catelyn is kind of very firm with Robb. She doesn't, allow herself to feel sorry for him and let him seek comfort and all that. She straight up tells him either have a decision and be decisive and never be indecisive in front of your lords, or go home. And so Robb at this point then, with kind of Catelyn helping him, figures out the plan that what he's going to do is he's going to basically make a diversion. He's going to do a sneak attack and try to attack Jaime. And that makes him realize that they need the twins. And so that will be the next portion of Robb's journey, which we'll cover more in episode 9. Half-man war chance. Hell yeah. first notable difference is where they are actually encamped at. It also has a lot more defenses than just them just showing up right outside. This is just kind of like, this doesn't really make sense. There would be outriders that would spot you way before you got to Tywin's camp. But overall, the main difference is Tywin's camp is actually at the Crossroad Inns, which is ironic given that is exactly where Tyrion got caught at. That's where he got caught by Catelyn. And we also see the innkeep got hanged, which is kind of crazy because the innkeep did nothing wrong. What was she going to do? Stop Catelyn from taking Tyrion somehow? Just shows how ruthless the Lannisters are and how they rule by fear. I'm not really going to play much of the rest of this scene because it's very accurate to the book. The only main difference is that Tywin gets interrupted, that Robb is going to be coming right for him, more or less. So he tells Adam Marbrand, who is like his blackfish for Robb, to basically bring all of the scouting and raiding parties back to basically force Robb to come south to meet him, while also attacking his baggage trains and just being annoying. And so that then sets up the Battle of the Green Fork and the Battle of the Whispering Wood, which both will happen in the next episode.
The only crossing is at the Twins.
Lord Frey controls that bridge.
Like I said, this whole stuff doesn't happen.
The late Lord Frey, my father.
Robb kind of
calls him.
informs Catelyn of
At
these
the Trident,
meetings.
he didn't appear until the battle was done.
Where did you find him?
In the brush above the encampment. He looked to be counting.
Obviously, none of this happened in the book. This is all created for the show, and to create, I think, some tension for what Robb's plan will be.
Tell Lord Tywin, winter is coming for him. 20,000 Northerners marching south to find out if he really does shit gold.
As badass as this scene is for Robb, like I've said, Robb just isn't this character yet in the book. He becomes more like this character, especially at the beginning of book 2. But he's not like that in the book yet. In the book, he's still an unconfident young teenager who's still yet to find his way. And so the Whispering Wood will be like that first big bout of confidence for him and his growth. He's definitely not doing stuff like this. And also, you know, I don't know how realistic is the Lannister scout going to somehow get into Moat Cailin? I don't think so. So overall, this just really couldn't have happened in the book. But overall, I think it does hype up the tension for the show version of these events. So I don't have a major problem with it, given how they've kind of depicted Robb. But overall, it just does not happen.
You're too old to protect anyone.
Shut up, Joffrey.
That Sir Jaime Lannister would take your place as Lord Commander of the King's Guard.
What a
The
joke.
man who profaned his blade with the blood of the king he had sworn to defend.
You tell him, Barry.
A hall to die in, and men to bury me.
Barry does not need a retirement home. He's got it, man. Get him, Barry the Bold. He can kill them all. Hell yeah, dude. Take him down. Should have backed
Even
Ned.
now I could cut through the 5 of you like carving a cake.
This scene makes me so sad. Just given where Barry the Bold goes in the show, it makes me so sad. But this is pretty accurate. We also have a scene with Janos Slynt that is not in the show at this point, but basically he gets rewarded for betraying Ned, and he gets his own sigil, and he becomes the Lord of Harrenhal. So he's totally going to keep that title for a long time, but we do miss out on that. Let's get to then Sansa.
Treason is treason.
It gets me every time. Treason is treason.
Anything else?
If you still have any affection in your heart for me, please do me this kindness, your grace.
I will say one thing that the book does really well, and I think Sansa, you know, the show did this pretty well as well, is Sansa realizes that the true power is to appease Joffrey, because Joffrey is the wild card, and Sansa still loves Joffrey and all that stuff. But she does realize manipulating him is the key to Ned surviving. So, for instance, Littlefinger is going to do the exact same thing. Littlefinger manipulates, basically, Joffrey to kill Ned. And so it goes over Cersei's head. It's not what Cersei wanted. So everybody does realize the key to this is manipulating Joffrey, realizing who is the person truly in power. It's the riddle that Varys is going to give to Tyrion in season 2. So I do think they do this scene pretty well, and that ends us out for episode 8. Episode 8 had a lot of cuts, a lot of changes. Overall, I mean, episode 8's such a weird one because it's not nearly as faithful to the book as some of the past episodes have been in this season, but episode 8 is still really, really strong. It's a very good episode overall. And that's what I mean. Like, when I'm saying, these changes and these cuts, it doesn't necessarily mean that the episode is bad. It's just to show that there's a lot of differences. And I still think season 1, even its lowest episodes, are by far the best episodes of this show. And for this one, I think from an adaptation point of view, if I was ranking them on a tier list, this would probably be one of the lower ones. But still, very good episode. And that'll get us into episode 9, Ned's last episode in the show. And it's a real heartbreaker.
What of your daughter's life, my lord?
Yeah, Ned.
Precious thing.
How about you think about Sansa for once? So getting into episode 9, like I mentioned for episode 8, this whole sequence was split into 2. So I didn't play this whole conversation because it's very accurate, outside of maybe the very end of the conversation. As Varys not only talks about Sansa's life, he also references Rhaegar's children and how children are constantly brought into these things, and it's always the innocents that are affected. That is something that pushes Ned over the edge. It plays exactly on the trauma that he's been feeling, and it's a very nice payoff to his journey throughout this book. The other thing that gets brought up here in this chapter that's not really brought up in the show is Ned does a good job of rationalizing through things. Even if Catelyn doesn't have Tyrion, well, there's still an issue of you have Stannis who could possibly try and come take King's Landing. You have Renly doing who knows what at this point. You have Robb marshaling an army coming south. The Lannisters don't know what the Vale's going to do. They're surrounded by enemies. And so Ned does think about that, that might be something that's able to save him from dying or imprisonment or any of that stuff. But for the most part, a very good opening scene that is pretty faithful to the book, leaving out a couple of details. Animal lovers, look away. So first things first with this scene with Theon, this all did happen in the books as well, that Robb had people that were taking down birds from the twins so that no message were being sent out to alert what Robb was doing. And he had the Blackfish basically taking out all the Lannister spies and outriders trying to see what Robb was doing. And we even have a nice payoff to how I talked about with episode 8. Tywin had sent Adam Marbury to basically start retreating, but also be harassing the baggage trains, harassing them overall. And so the Blackfish has been dealing with that. So we're kind of seeing that cat and mouse game. Theon is the person that represents that in the show, but Theon was just somebody serving under the Blackfish. So again, they cut out a major character for Robb's, I would say, arc in the first couple books, and that is the Blackfish. So unfortunately, just have to keep bringing that up because he's just not present here.
His grandfather's bannerman. We can't expect his support.
Expect nothing of Walder.
Can't expect
Frey, and you'll never be surprised.
Nothing of Walder.
Look,
we've got 5 times his numbers. You can take the twins if you have to.
Not in time.
Hey Theon, if you haven't noticed, very defensible castle in the twins. So trying to just straight up take it, gonna lose a ton of men, and you're gonna lose a ton of time. That's the big part of it.
Enter the twins alone. He'll sell you to the Lannisters as he likes.
Or throw you in a dungeon, or slit your throat.
My father would do whatever.
So let's talk about this sequence, because it's actually very different. So the way this starts is kind of similar, where there's actually 2 moments. There's Robb and Catelyn talking before they actually get to the twins, and then they talk again when they get to the twins. But they actually end up meeting some of Walder Frey's sons, and we meet the main character, I would say, for the Freys, outside of Walder for the first book, is Stevron Frey. And Stevron, to me, is one of the only likable Freys in the entire book. And, well, he should be in the show, but he's not. And he basically brings the message that Robb should come into the twins so they can iron out, peace arrangements, all that kind of stuff. And then that's when all these other people are saying, yeah, don't do that. That's a bad idea. And so at this point, there's a lot of things being said because they're saying all of these different accusations against the Freys right in front of Stevron Frey. And so it's going south really quickly. They're literally insulting the Freys right to their face. So Catelyn, seeing where the wind is blowing, if they want to cross, if they want to get to Riverrun, they have to, at this point, cross. So Catelyn says she'll go instead. So that way, it makes it look like, okay, there's still a lot of trust being shown here. Catelyn is the mother of Robb. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. So that's what then prompts Catelyn to go with the Freys. Here, it just kind of is the Frey messengers rock up, and then Catelyn has already decided she's going to go. not how that really plays out. And I also think there's a little bit more throughout this section of the story with the Frey history in terms of some of their dishonorable actions, like showing up late to Robert's rebellion and the Battle of the Trident. And now they've also not showed up to support Edmure. Walder Frey is going to say that he was still rallying men, and Edmure basically too hastily took on Jaime and lost. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of foreshadowing. Remember, this is the last time we're going to see Walder Frey until the Red Wedding. So there's a lot of foreshadowing that has to be done in this section of the story.
You see that? 15 she is.
Walder, you are disgusting, man.
Flower. And the honey's all mine.
He's just so nasty, dude. Why you gotta say it like that?
Didn't come to the last one either. Or the one before
Dang,
that.
that's disrespectful. You know, fair is fair. He didn't come to any weddings.
Always pissed on me.
My lord, I...
Don't deny it. You know it's true. The fine Lord Tully.
So let's stop it here. I'm not going to play the entire conversation, but they do a very good job of the portrayal of Walder Frey from the book. He's just this guy that's just, he says whatever's on his mind. He does not care about pleasantries. He's impolite, is very hostile to Catelyn. He's just awful. And they do a really good job of showing that. There's a little bit more added from the book that's not in the show. Like, for instance, Walder Frey had in the past tried to make marriage deals with some of the higher families. He'd also put out a feeler of fostering Robb and Arryn, but we know Robb and Arryn was being promised other people. So there's a lot of things where, like, this chapter is really supposed to tell us that Walder Frey has been slighted so much by everybody. That's how he feels. And even in this situation where Walder Frey thinks, I could just wait for you guys to get taken out by the Lannisters. If you attack, it'll take you too long and Tywin will attack you in the rear and you'll all be killed. You just don't have that ability to attack us, really. But the thing that holds Walder back is that he has no love of the Lannisters. He has nothing to gain from helping the Lannisters. He won't be given anything. Everything that Walder is doing in this section of the story is about, okay, I have two noble families. Well, I guess if you want to count the Tullys, 3 noble families, kind of competing for my bridge and for my allegiance. Which one is going to offer me something? And that's what this all boils down to. And so we'll see that as I skip to the next scene with Catelyn telling Robb the terms.
Well,
what's the news?
Lord Walder has granted your crossing.
We knew Walder Frey was a good guy. We knew
men,
it.
You will be taking on his son, Oliver, as your personal squire. He expects a knighthood in good time. You will marry one of his daughters.
Oh, R.I.P. Robb, having to marry a stinky, smelly Frey girl. It's going to come back to bite him, as we know later on. But, yeah, this scene, for the most part, is pretty accurate. There's a little bit more to it that, for instance, Catelyn is going to have to foster 2 Frey boys that become very important to the Northern storyline. So they'll go up and they spend some time in a Clash of Kings with Bran and all the people at Winterfell. So there's a little bit more to it. And for a lot of people in the community, these terms are quite steep. Because Robb is a very powerful lord, and yes, the Freys want to get a lot out of this, but you're basically having 2 people in your family marry into the Freys, while all these other added things. It's a lot. It goes to show you the desperation that Robb's campaign is in. You know, he's on the losing side as of right now, in terms of he has less men than the Lannisters, his biggest allies and the Riverlords, they're already defeated. Robb is looking kind of screwed. So he is backed into a corner where this is a desperation play. He has to accept it. He can't deny it. And we don't actually see Catelyn ironing out these terms, so we don't know if she could have gotten a better deal for Robb. But it's just something he's going to have to accept. Another thing that's left out here is that Catelyn suggests to Robb that he should leave 400 of his own men to basically keep the twins in check. Make sure they're always open to them so that if they ever have to retreat or something, those men will be able to hold it. Unforeseen consequences will be coming with that. So again, there is a lot of foreshadowing to the Red Wedding in this chapter, the things to come. It's a lot of setup, which I think is really nice. It's one of my reasons that I really do enjoy the first book in terms of a writing standpoint.
If the day should ever come when your Lord Father was forced to choose between honor on the one hand and those he loves on the other, what would he do?
He would do both, because we've seen him break both of those.
Was right, no matter what.
And Lord,
right is a point of view.
What is duty against the feel of a newborn
What a great
son in your
quote.
arms?
Aemon, one of the goated
All
characters of the
brothers
entire
must.
series.
A day when he must choose.
So intense, Aemon,
And
so
this is
intense.
my day. Is that what you're saying? No one knows.
John, you're acting a little
I may be a
self-absorbed.
bastard,
Just saying.
but he is my father and Rob is my brother.
Just makes me
The
smile
gods
watching
were
Aemon.
cruel when they saw fit to test my vows. They waited till I was old.
So let's stop it right there, because the only major difference that I wanted to pause this section on, for the most part, I've been skipping a lot of Jon's scenes the last few episodes, just because I really do think the show does a brilliant job of adapting his storyline in terms of book accuracy. With this, the only thing that's different, and that I really wanted to talk about with Aemon, because it's still a big portion of the community talks about it, is Aemon doesn't say it like this. Aemon says his vows were tested 3 times. Once when he was a boy, once when he was in his prime, and once when he was old. So he talks about in this scene, obviously when the Targaryens fell. Though we have to speculate on some of the others. And some of those might be, okay, maybe he was in love with someone, or whatever you think. There's a lot of theories about that, so I won't break into it. But that's the only major difference. I do think this is one of the core scenes of not only the show, but especially of season 1, because think about where it's placed. Ned has just been given the offer by Cersei/Varys to more or less say that he was lying and that Joffrey is the true king, to try and protect Sansa. And that is a very big conflict of interest, because on one hand, honor and all that stuff tells him he shouldn't do that, because that is dishonorable. Joffrey is not the person that should be king. But on the other hand, love for your children and your daughter, maybe you do get rid of some of your honor, or some of your own personal, even pride, maybe, to try and protect people close to you. And I think that's central to why this chapter and this scene is placed specifically in this episode, as Jon is starting to have to make a decision. Will he desert, or will he become a man of the Night's Watch fully and going north of the Wall? We are finally synced up again with Daenerys' plotline. Although I would say this chapter happens right before Ned dies, so still a little, iffy. And just like that, all the Dothraki knew shit got real. I do want to point this out because I think the show just kind of touches on the basic idea, but in the book, this is really an important moment, because we've talked about throughout this breaking down of things they missed. Horses are everything to the Dothraki, and they definitely rule by strength. They rule by the power in their horses and things like that. And so Drogo falling off of his horse is seen as, 1, major weakness, and 2, his ability to ride is everything. And so that is basically him now losing his power. It's the downfall of that happening. And the other thing that the show doesn't really touch on is all of the Blood Riders are tied to Drogo. So when Drogo dies, they all have to die either in combat or killing themselves, whatever. They have to go with their Khal into the afterlife. And so at that point, it starts clicking that all of these men are going to die if Drogo dies. And so that has a lot of mixed emotions. Tensions get really high. They start blaming people, all that stuff, because based on your culture, your time is up.
Scouts tell us the Stark host has moved south from the Twins, with Lord Frey's levies in tow. They're a day's march north.
The boy may lack experience and sense, but...
So let's talk about this sequence here as well. We're going to have to stop a couple times with this plot line with the Battle of the Green Fork. But like Tyrion arrives, he arrives late. He's kind of getting scolded by his father. And Tyrion, at this point, gets told he's going to be placed in the Vanguard. Kind of similar to the show as well, but things are very different here that the show never really touches on. So Tyrion gets placed in the Vanguard. He's not the person in charge of it. He's going to be under the mountain. But the one thing that is really crazy is that Tyrion is being placed next to the river. This is going to be the place with the most amount of fighting, because you're going to try and circle, the army, basically. So what Tywin is planning is that because he's placing Tyrion and the mountain clansmen there, that is going to lead to them getting overrun. Tywin then can come in with his reserves and basically push them into the river, right? So it's basically a trap. He's placing Tyrion there specifically. And the other thing is that Tyrion thinks of is Tywin's actively trying to get him killed. He knew exactly what was going to happen here, and Tyrion, not being a fighter or a warrior, he's never even been in a battle before, this is going to get him killed. So that's just another ripple that I think the show, albeit they do Tyrion and Tywin's relationship good, it's not perfect in terms of an adaptation standpoint. And so we'll skip a little bit more towards when we get to the battle that happens in the show, and I'll talk a bit more.
We'll be at the Vanguard tomorrow.
That's how you know you're dead. Bronn, it's time to desert.
What do you want from me?
What do I want from you?
Yeah, Tyrion, what do you want from Shay?
I want you to share my tent. I want you to pour my wine, laugh at my jokes, rub my legs when they are sore after a day's ride.
I think that the show changes this for a specific reason, but very much in the book, it is like, oh yeah, Tyrion is straight up paying Shay to be like his girlfriend or his wife, I guess, which is definitely the implication in the show, but it's made a lot weirder in the book, and especially as we go on, it's a very weird dynamic, because also Shay in the book is much younger. That's not to say like the actress who plays Shay is old or anything, but I mean like she's much more of like a teenager in the book. She's a lot more naive to things, whereas Shay I feel like is more of a character who is more wise to the world at times. So I don't know. That's all I'll say about Shay. Let's continue on.
Maigi.
So let's talk about this scene a little bit. The first thing is that it isn't just Jorah versus one of Drogo's blood riders. Like it is. They do have a fight, and it goes down very similarly to the way the show portrays it as. But there's also Daenerys' Khas, which are like the people that are supposed to protect her. They are also getting involved in the little skirmish that's happening. Also to note, people are already deserting. They're already leaving because of Daenerys' actions and because of what Drogo, the state that he's in, he's dying, he can't ride a horse. So people are already leaving because when a Khal dies, it is a very, very bad situation because you have multiple people trying to now assert themselves as being the next Khal, trying to show their power and dominance. It leads to a lot of death. It can lead to, a lot of infighting. It's similar to like if you've watched, say, like The Sopranos or something, where once the leader dies, you have a lot of people that are fighting for that position. It's the same idea with the Dothraki here. And so it just leads to a lot of chaos. And so this scene is very accurate. One thing that we do see in the book is as Daenerys is seeing this tent, it seems like there's shadows dancing as this ritual is being done. And I didn't show a lot of what happens inside the tent because I think it's pretty brutal and I don't know how much YouTube would let me show. But the actual idea that 3 men have to come in, hold down this horse, and they use it to basically make this bloodbath for Drogo to try and revive him or keep him alive, more or less. And we'll see how that plays out.
Tribesmen of the Vale!
Speech time! Speech! Yeah, so we know for budget reasons they had to not show the battle. I feel like there's a lot of things where that they were cut from the book because of budget reasons, but actually in the book, of the battles that do happen in this first season, the Battle of the Green Fork is the one we see the most of. The Battle of the Whispering Wood is the one which we see in like the next scene or two that is kind of like this, where it's like, you don't really see it, you hear it more or less, but you don't see it. Here, we see everything that happens. Tyrion has to lead his men, and they're going to hold the far left of the Lannister line, basically trying to hold the river. And at that point, I told you guys before, he was placed there more or less to probably die and or for his men, because Tywin does not have a great opinion of them, so he thinks they'll break pretty easily, and that will allow for an easy victory, because then all of the Northmen will start funneling in and trying to take that side, and they'll flip the battle, more or less. And so as that's happening, Tyrion is in the middle of this battle. He's barely surviving. He takes a pretty sizable wound, and he's holding on for dear life. He then sees his father, who's in this splendid armor, who it's even better than his brothers, who has a really famed reputation, and he sees his father come in and kind of sweep in. Now, another thing to note with this battle is we know it's all a feint attack. It's not meant to be an actual battle. Roose Bolton has been given command by Robb of his foot. So all of his mounted, they are off with him trying to free Riverrun. So just remember that. Of the 20,000 men that Robb says he has, they're not all with him when he's going to save Riverrun. He has a massive disadvantage against Jaime, which we'll talk about. But another thing Tyrion notes before the battle starts is he notes that it's kind of weird because, for one, the Stark forces could have easily attacked in the middle of the night, but they seemed to just stop. They kind of seemed to let the Lannisters, to bait them into this open battle, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense given the Starkmen have been marching throughout the night and they took the Lannisters unaware. And we know why this was done, and Roose Bolton is a very cautious man. He specifically gets rid of a lot of men from different families in the north so that he weakens them and not his own men. That's something we'll see really throughout all of the books in the show, not so much. Hell yeah, it's Battle of the Whispering Wood time. One thing I really love about this chapter in the book is how it's a very nice reflection to the Battle of the Green Fork.
We should go, my lady.
No.
So let's give a little bit of a preamble here because there's a lot to talk about that the show just kind of skips over. So the reason this battle is allowed to happen, let's kind of set some things up here, is the first thing is there's basically a siege of Riverrun. And to siege Riverrun, you have to basically have 3 camps because the rivers divide the castle. And so to properly siege it, you would need to be basically camped in on all 3 sides. And that allows for a distinct advantage for Robb because he can take certain forces while the other forces are not able to reinforce it. So what Robb basically does is he sends a lot of men under the Tully banner to try and basically get Jaime to follow him into the Whispering Wood, where then his forces will be able to overtake Jaime. And this works flawlessly. Jaime gets baited in, he comes into the Whispering Wood, and because of the archers and being attacked on all sides, Jaime's forces are easily defeated. But I want to point out, this is a small percentage of Jaime's forces. Even though Robb is undermanned, he has way less power than Jaime currently has. This is not all of Jaime's forces. They're only taking on a small percentage. One thing that the show is going to cut is there's actually 2 battles that free Riverrun. The first one is the Battle of the Whispering Wood, which is what you're seeing here on screen, and we'll play a little bit more. And the second one is actually the Battle of the Camps, and that's the actual freeing of the siege of Riverrun. So we'll talk about that more in episode 10, but let's continue on here with the rest and the finishing up of the Battle of the Whispering Wood. W. Robb, W. Robb.
I sent 2,000 men to their graves today.
The bards will sing songs.
Okay, that wasn't W. Robb, but still you won.
But the dead won't hear them. Did we rescue my sisters from the Queen? Did we free the North from those who want us on our knees?
We got to talk about this. So this is actually something they added to the Battle of the Whispering Wood. It kind of continues to them adding to Robb being the main hero of the story, especially in these early seasons. Like, this is a conversation that him and Catelyn have. And so Catelyn is the one really saying a lot of this to Robb, not so much Robb. Catelyn's like, you know, we haven't won the war. You know, Riverrun is still being besieged. And so this like big heroic moment is still there for Robb because he helped basically win the Battle of the Whispering Wood. He led that attack. But at the same time, it's not this grand like speech here and all that kind of stuff. I think it is just to really hype up Robb, and especially because we're not going to have the Battle of the Camps in the show and it's not really ever going to be mentioned. This is kind of like, oh, okay, Robb has freed the Riverlands type thing. So yeah, I understand why they did it, but not in the book at all. Animal lovers, once again, look away. Come on, Arya. Oh. Ugh. Oh boy. So let's talk about Arya a little bit before we get into the main thing you guys want to see. Is Arya spends a lot of time before Ned's death, kind of explaining what's been going on. So she's been surviving in the streets of King's Landing for a good amount of time now. You know, she has struggled with trying to eat. Some days she barely eats at all. She's living in the poorest parts of King's Landing in Flea Bottom. She's doing what we just saw there, where she's trying to kill birds like pigeons and either selling them and all that stuff. It kind of shows how resourceful Arya can be, because even at this young age, she's being able to survive. But we also see something else with her teachings from Syria, that she's able to avoid a trap. So Cersei basically has placed this trap where she has some Lannister men dressed up as Starks, and they're supposed to be like, oh, you know, this is the boat that's going to take you away, Arya, trying to like lure her in. But Arya sees right through it. She goes, oh, wait, these are not any guards that I know of. This is obviously a trap. So I think the main point that the show does not really get to show with Arya is how much she's been able to survive and how clever she can be. And so let's continue on. We're gonna have to pause probably 2 or 3 more times, but there's some good stuff here.
A lemon one. Or any of them.
3 coppers.
How about a nice fat pigeon?
Oh, piss off now, go on.
Another thing I really do like about this chapter is that we get to understand through Arya's point of view the ethics of stealing. You know, Arya might not survive if she's not stealing or any of that kind of stuff, that it makes it such a fascinating conversation. That's very relevant today. Like, when is stealing okay? Is it ever okay? I think that's a really interesting point that the book brings up, that the show kind of, you know, brings up a little bit, but you're not inside of Arya's head, so you're not seeing her rationalize through it. But I do think that's another great part of it.
Do you have any stale ones from yesterday? Or any burnt ones?
Piss off!
How I react when someone says season 6 is good. Okay, one more pause. This was by the way, this is a terrible screenshot to have as the pause. But one other thing to point out, as Arya is going to see her father and his last moments, we actually hear a lot of rumors from the common people. Like, we get a lot of stuff about how much they like Renly and what actually happened between Robert and Ned. A lot of the stuff you see, like the play in season 6, where there's like that obvious, like, oh, we're trying to tell the story of what happened in the early seasons, but through a different perspective. It's kind of what you get through Arya's POV, is you have a lot of people speculating on that kind of stuff. But let's unfortunately continue. There's our boy Ned. At least they know that he's still hobbling. One thing I really love about what the show did is, because we're seeing all this through Arya's head in the book, we don't know what Ned's thinking. We don't know what Ned's necessarily doing outside of what Arya can see. We don't know any of that. So this last moment from Ned before he's sentenced to die, it's just that last nice heroic moment. And a lot of this actually plays through Ned's point of view in the show versus like Arya, for instance. And we even see Sansa recount these events through her own POV. So I think it's nice that the show takes the time, because it is a show. It's not limited by the book of having to tell it through one, point of view, that we get this nice little moment. One last thing that Ned does for Arya. I just think D&D really did a good job when they were adapting this scene.
Joffrey Baratheon is the one true heir to
Ned,
the
I know
Iron
why you're
Throne.
doing it, but it just
By
sucks.
the grace of all the
that
gods,
smug little grin, piece of shit.
Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm.
What is to be done with this traitor, Your Grace?
Yes, Joffrey, what will you do?
And my lady Sansa has begged mercy for her father.
God, you're such an asshole, Joffrey. Such a tease.
But they've the soft hearts of women. Treason shall never go unpunished.
Treason is treason.
Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
You piece of shit. Save him, Arya, save him, please. Get there, Arya, get there. The sound design in this is so good. The way this is shot, the sound and audio design is beautiful. That hurts every time. It really does. It hurts every single time. But I just want to say, there's a reason most people think season 1 is their favorite season, or it's the best season, or even this episode is the best episode of the entire show. I mean, I didn't play the whole thing because I can't. HBO will strike me down, but I mean, everything is insane. The way they adapted the scene, the way they shot the scene, the performances by all of the actors involved. I mean, Sophie Turner as Sansa in this scene's fantastic. Jack Gleason as Joffrey. I mean, there's just so much to say. There's a reason this is one of the best scenes of all time. It is iconic. It completely shattered the way that I consumed media in both a book sense and a show sense. I watched this show when I was way too young to be watching a show like this, but it destroyed my little mind. And so I'll say this, when we look at the books, like I said the last time we paused, the big thing is none of this is through Ned's point of view. And so what the show does is the show allows for us to be inside Ned in his final moments. You know, he's saying those final like words or prayers, like whispering it under his breath. We're seeing as everything slows down. You know, Ned can't hear anything, and we're inside of his head as he basically puts his head down to be executed, and we lose Ned. It's a beautiful scene. I think one thing that's missing here, and that's more to do with the next few episodes, is the reason Joffrey executes Ned is a bit different in the show versus the book. In the show, it is more just like Joffrey is doing it just to do it. In the book, there's a lot more that goes into it. So firstly, Littlefinger is the one that's manipulating Joffrey to kill Ned. And that is all because of Janos Slynt. He's the one that also executes this order instantly, who's on Littlefinger's payroll. And you also have the fact that Joffrey is giving in to what the crowd wants. Arya is hearing all of this in the crowd, that everybody wants him to die. They're hungry for blood. And even after Ned dies, they just leave as though nothing happened. It's a really heartbreaking chapter. And I guess I'll save it for episode 10 because there is more that happens at the end of this chapter that they save for the next episode. Nah, screw it. This is what happens at the end of this Arya chapter, is that Yoren takes Arya and, he puts her up against the wall. He basically has a knife to her, and we don't know what happens. He has her by the hair, and then her chapter ends. We do not see Arya for the rest of the story. It's very much a cliffhanger that George leaves for us. Obviously, we don't think maybe Yoren's going to kill her or anything, but we don't know what her story is going to be like in A Clash of Kings or the second book, and so that's where her story ends. It would have ended here at the end of episode 9. But yeah, remarkable episode that I think really, it hit every button it needed to. And say what you want about D&D and their writing in later seasons, their ability to adapt this scene, they knocked it out of the park. So that'll get us into episode 10, a very sad end to episode 9. So we are into episode 10. And like I said, this open pretty different than the book, where it kind of ends right here. We don't go any further. So just to point out, that is where in the book Arya's story will end. Now that is not the case in the show, but just know for book readers and all that stuff, that is where her journey ends. So we're going to now move to Brienne's story, which for the most part is accurate, but they do kind of skip a little bit. It's the pesky three-eyed crow. One of the few times we actually do the magical elements of this story.
Eyes.
Not for many years yet.
So the big differences in the book are that, firstly, this doesn't happen this way. Like, Bran doesn't instantly go into the crypts. But what actually does happen is that Bran talks to Luwin about his dream. So he has this dream where he's gone into the crypts with the three-eyed crow to Ned's statue, and he seems specifically sad about Jon for some reason. I think it's a little bit of foreshadowing to Jon's parentage and all of that, and Ned never being able to tell Jon that. Also, here is my kitty, Rhea. If you can't see her on the camera well, here's a nice little look. Say hi to the camera, Rhea. But yeah, she's trying to be a little nosy as we do this recording. But with that being said, Rickon also has this exact same dream. Looks like you guys are going to get Rhea for at least some part of this recording. But that then leads Bran to tell Luwin about this, and so he basically, trying to get Bran to kind of settle down about this, he basically has Osha take Bran down there, and Luwin goes as well, so it's not just Osha and Bran. The other thing is, Hodor seems afraid of the crypts, at least in this instance, which is a little weird as well. There's a whole theory I did a video on about the Winterfell statues in the crypts, and maybe that's Ned's spirit returning. Who knows? Rickon, you gotta get your dog under control.
Beast is supposed to be chained in the kennels.
He doesn't like chains. What are you doing down here? Come back up with us. No,
So obviously they changed this a little bit because Shaggy Dog actually bites Luwin in the book. And then we have a whole thing where Rickon and Bran, they end up going with Luwin, and then that's when we get the next portion of this chapter. But overall, they got this correct outside of they just don't have Luwin here.
It's only naturally should be in your thoughts and dreams. But that doesn't mean that...
Bran,
Couple differences here. First thing, Osha actually is someone leaning into Bran believing this stuff, to believe in his dreams that both him and Rickon got because they're quite magical. Remember, Osha is from north of the Wall. She believes in a lot of this stuff. And so it also gets to prompt Luwin and Osha and Bran having this conversation about the Children of the Forest. And we get a lot of our history of Westeros in this chapter, based upon the Children of the Forest, the Andals, the First Men. We get a lot of the history of what happened there. I don't have the time to go through all of it in this video because we'd be here forever. But if you do want to learn more about it, I would suggest reading the books. There's some awesome lore into how do the kingdoms become what they are. But here we also have this really heartbreaking moment where even Luwin, this person that's very stoic, he doesn't show his emotions a lot, when he gets this letter, or note I should say, when reading it and basically turning to Bran, he's actually crying. So that tells you how much Ned has affected people around him. And I think this sets up his journey in Clash of Kings, or the second season for show watchers, pretty well. As we start to dive into more of the magical elements, well, at least in the book we do. In the show, it doesn't really dive into it yet until really like season 3 and 4. The acting here by Michelle Farley. I mean, just how hollow she looks. This is another one of those greatest added scenes of season 1. It's just the acting. And then transitioning into Richard Madden. I mean, it's probably two of the best acting performances of season 1.
Robb!
This is one of those scenes that makes up for all the times that they haven't done Robb's vulnerability.
You've ruined your sword.
Scenes like this is why season 1 is the best season of Game of Thrones.
Every one of them. I'm gonna kill them all.
So let's talk about this scene. I gushed over it enough. I think this might be my favorite added scene of season 1. I know I've said that a lot because season 1 has a lot of bangers, but this is just one to me that does so much for the characters of Catelyn and Robb, showing them processing the grief of losing Ned. And one thing I'll give the show credit for that the book doesn't have time for is, in the book, this is all internalized. Catelyn never has the opportunity to feel what she does in this episode, where she's breaking down, she's crying. All of that is internalized. So as we're reading the character of Catelyn, we know she's feeling all of these emotions. Like, for instance, she's feeling it as all these people are cheering Robb over his victory at the camps. Catelyn, at the same time, is just completely destroyed by the loss of her husband, but she can't show any of that. And Robb is similar in that way as well. So let's talk about a lot. There is a bunch that gets skipped over in this episode with Robb's campaign specifically. So like I mentioned in episode 9, the Whispering Wood is like the first initial battle of the battle for River Run, I'll say. And so what then happens is, because River Run, it's very hard to siege, you have to siege it from 3 different sides. It comes to this point where Robb basically attacks the camps. That's why it's called the Battle of the Camps. So Robb attacks the western camp, I believe. The northern camp gets attacked by the Blackfish, and then the southern camp tries to basically reinforce the northern camp, and in their crossing, they get kind of swept up too close to River Run, and some of their siege engines start inflicting massive damage, and it's a hell of a situation, but it's a huge win for Robb, because even during the Battle of the Camps, he was outmanned. He did not have the manpower in a straight battle to beat the Westerman forces, even with Jaime captured and some of his men defeated. So the Battle of the Camps is another major turning point, because it now allows the River Lords to fully get behind Robb, and also it completely disperses Jaime's force, which was very sizable, and has them either captured, killed, or retreating west to the Golden Tooth. So that's really important, because that is another major stepping stone for Robb becoming king. He has now freed the Lords of the Riverlands for the most part. And so that's a really important moment that they do kind of skip over here, and I understand why they didn't have the budget to do it. But maybe you could have implied it, like some of the other battles. We also have things like Lord Blackwood coming out of River Run to try and help the assault. Edmure, remember, has been captured this whole time, and so yeah, and in the show we don't meet these characters, but in the book what ends up happening is Catelyn then arrives at River Run. She goes to talk to her father, who is dying, who, again, we don't see any of the River Run stuff until season 3, which I think is a really big shame in my opinion. But we see that happen. Catelyn's talking to her father about some of the histories between, him and her, and then the Blackfish. We get a lot of lore, especially about the Tully family in the last few years. And so then what happens is Catelyn, she leaves her father, she talks to the Blackfish, kind of giving him like an update of his situation. And then she goes to Robb, who Robb has been praying in the God's Wood, and he's been surrounded by some of his lords and the people around him that are close to him. He has a special guard, kind of like the King's Guard, but not really, just like his own personal guard of lords and like ladies. So he's kind of surrounded by a personal guard that Jaime tried to cut through, and that's why some of the Karstark kids end up dying. And then at that point, it then leads to Robb calling this council for what they're going to do next. So we'll talk about that in future scenes.
The boar's great tusks, they boded ill.
Hey, it's Marillion. He's not supposed to be here.
Health. And the beast was every bit as fat.
So let's stop on this screenshot for Sansa, because they skipped a ton with Sansa. Now, Sansa has been completely destroyed by her father's death, of course. She's in a deep depression. She's suicidal. She thinks they're going to kill her. She's having these terrible nightmares where she can't sleep. She's not really eating. She thinks about just throwing herself out the window. It's a very dark time for Sansa, to the point where Joffrey, with some of the Kingsguard, the Hound included, go to her bedchamber to wake her up, to make sure that she's going to come to this session of court that's being held. He wants her to be there. And so he's trying to get her to get dressed and all this stuff, and she doesn't want to. She's throwing insults back at Joffrey, and the two are going back at it. And then he has Meryn Trant basically hit her full on the face with a mailed glove. There's a reason they probably left that out, even though there's some horrible things that happen even in this episode. It just shows you the level of cruelty that's happening. And also, the other thing is, the Hound tells her to just give him what he wants. Be the proper lady that you've been trained to be. Avoid the pain and abuse you're going to receive if you keep acting kind of defiant. And so that starts out Sansa's journey, especially in A Clash of Kings. But with this scene, it's fairly accurate outside of Marillion is not here. So the singer that I just showed on screen, he was with Catelyn in her journey to the Eyrie, but now all of a sudden he's in King's Landing. For book readers, this character has a very big, important role in the third book specifically. So I won't say much more than that if you want to read the books. But yeah, he shouldn't be here. And he also shouldn't be getting the punishment he's about to get.
Do as you bid, child.
You kind of get the Hound Sansa scene there, but not really. It's a lot more, I'd say, important in the book.
And as soon as you've had your blood, I'll put a son in you. Mother says that shouldn't be long. This one here.
Joffrey, you really are.
See what happens to traitors.
You promised to be merciful.
I was. I gave him a clean death.
See, some of this conversation is actually what I'm referencing. This happens at the beginning of the chapter, not at this part of the chapter.
Let me go.
And obey.
Like all this dialogue, beginning of the chapter.
Look at him!
Look at him!
How long do I have to
Holy
look?
cow. Sophie Turner's acting is really good in this scene.
As long as it pleases me.
Ooh, Sansa, do it. Save us all some trouble. You're gonna die, but just do it. Ah, the Hound. Come on, man. But yeah, that's where I'm going to stop the scene. Just know, almost all the dialogue they ripped from this scene actually doesn't happen the way it happens in the book. In the book, all this conversation that you're hearing right now is not actually what's being said between Joffrey and Sansa in the book. It's similar, but all of this is almost directly taken from the beginning, when Sansa's not getting out of bed, she's being forced out of bed, all that kind of stuff. And even the dialogue between the Hound and Sansa happens after all of this. So they kind of mixed and matched the dialogue to just fit it into Sansa's arc.
That doesn't make Renly king. He's Robert's youngest brother.
Because Stannis is the rightful king.
Bran can't be Lord of Winterfell before me. Renly can't be king before Stannis.
W. Robb. All right, let's just break in before we get the big moment. Like I said, there's a lot missing in this chapter that's not in the show that I broke down in the last Robb and Catelyn scene. But I'm also not even clear in the show where this is happening. They don't make it very clear. Is this just in some sort of camp that he has set up? Because in the books, this all happens at Riverrun. You have all the River Lords, you have all the Northern men, and like you see here, they're debating what to do. Now, the debating goes on much longer, because it's not just who should be king. Renly or Stannis. It is also the idea that what do they do militarily? Because as of right now, there's a couple options. Tywin is now moving west. He's moving to go to Harrenhal. That's one thing that they actually do out of order. So we actually get Tyrion's chapter in his last chapter of the book before we get the King of the North chapter. In the Tyrion chapter, we learn a lot about what they're going to be doing and their movements and the state of the war. So Robb could theoretically go into the west. He could try and take Casterly Rock. He could raid there. He could do whatever. He could stay put. He could sue for peace. He could do a number of things. So they're all debating all this stuff. And the one thing that pops up is that Catelyn wants to sue for peace. There's nothing left in this war for her. They can't get Ned back. Let's sue for peace, get the girls back, and that we've accomplished what we needed to accomplish given that Ned's already dead. Why waste more lives? Stevron Frey actually comes up with another great plan, in my opinion, that gets shot down because it's viewed as cowardice, is to just straight up wait. Make a pact with Tywin for now, to just have a ceasefire, and then just deal with whoever's left. If Tywin is able to defeat Stannis and Renly, okay, then maybe we take up the war effort against him afterwards. If Stannis or Renly wins, well, just bend the knee to that king. That is the most logical approach to this, in my opinion. But none of that happens, and Stevron gets shot down, and that leads to then what we're going to see with the great Jon Umber.
Here is what I say to these two kings. Renly Baratheon is nothing to me. Nor Stannis neither. Why should they rule
what you say
over
about
me
Stannis?
and my... It was the dragons we bowed to.
It's unfortunate the dragon's going to be rebirthed in this episode.
Dead. There sits the only king I mean to bend my knee to. The King of the North!
Rhea, can you feel the chills? I can feel them.
Now and always.
Now and always.
The King of the North!
The King of the North! The King of the North! The King of the North!
We just gotta say it. The music in this episode is fantastic. Oh, that scene gives me chills every time. It's one of my favorite scenes of the entire show. And it's just a great conclusion for Robb in both the book and in the show. It happens very similar once we get to the point where Great Jon says, Robb's going to be king. That dialogue is almost straight from the book. Now, there is a key difference. In the book, the wording is a little different. In the show and the book, it's different because it's the King of the North, but it's also then the King in the North. So there is a bit of a difference in the terms of the wordage there. Confused me for a long time. But overall, same idea. And this is really the moment that Robb Stark's campaign dies, in my opinion, because he makes himself a king and now he isolates himself from any allies. But that's a season 2 and book 2 and beyond problem. Also, I'm going to skip Catelyn and Jaime's conversation because that never happens in the book, so there's not really much to say on it. They will communicate in the second book, but in this book, that just does not happen. We also get a scene with Lancel and Cersei, basically after they've hooked up or whatnot. Again, doesn't happen in the book, obviously, because we'd not be able to see that. Cersei is not a point of view at this point, so just another scene that was not in the book.
Jaime captured, his army is scattered. It's a catastrophe.
You tell him, Kevin.
We should sue for peace.
There's your piece.
So let's say a couple things first before we get to Tywin and Tyrion specifically. Kevin doesn't say that. It's Harris Swift who wants to declare for peace. But obviously there's no peace now. You've screwed that completely up. Not that Tywin hasn't, but like Cersei has completely screwed that up. Because at this point, the Starks want revenge, and we even had a chance for peace. You know, Catelyn offered that in the book anyway, but, you know, didn't go that way. And the other thing is, this chapter also happens before Robb is made king. But yeah, this chapter to me does a very good job in the book of just setting up what's going to happen in the next story, in A Clash of Kings, where you have Renly, Stannis, they've all created massive problems for Tywin, but Tywin also has a bigger threat right now because Robb is closer to him and has defeated Jaime and has Jaime as a prisoner. Where does he go? So that's what this chapter is about. It's setting those pieces in motion. And then with Tyrion and Tywin, we'll talk about their conversation here in a second.
Madness. Madness and stupidity.
That's never a good combo, Tywin.
I always thought you were a stunted fool.
You will serve as Hand of the King in my stead. You'll bring that boy king to heel and his mother too, if needs be. And if he gets
So let's talk about this scene in the book. Now, very clearly, obviously Tyrion has the same idea where he's like, why are you sending me? You've never thought of me that well. Why do you want me to rule? And the thing that, because we're in Tyrion's head, we know that Tyrion's thinking is Tyrion has put it together. Tywin doesn't believe Jaime is ever going to be returned to them. He has completely given up on Jaime. So in Tywin's mind, he now realizes that Tyrion is his last son and that he needs Tyrion, even if he doesn't like Tyrion, and especially we're going to see that as it goes forward. But Tyrion at this point is a tool that Tywin can use. Tywin knows Tyrion is very clever and can rule and stuff like that. So it's all about Tywin using what he has available to win the war at no matter what it costs. Dany doesn't look so good.
Sir Jorah.
So let's stop it right here because they skip a lot, and I think it's very vital to Daenerys' final 2 chapters. They skip a lot of her dream stuff. That's just something that they completely skipped from Daenerys' arc in the first season, is she has these dragon dreams whenever she's in these situations where she's either scared or she needs confidence. Like she gets a dragon dream before she marries Khal Drogo. And in the dream that she has before she wakes up, because she wakes up a couple times, she is dreaming basically on a lot of the things that have happened in the past, or her ancestors like Rhaegar, and she remembers Viserys. And we have this dream where it keeps repeating his line of "don't wake the dragon," but then it repeats enough to where it says "wake the dragon." It's a nice foreshadowing to what Daenerys is going to do. Everything in this chapter and the next one is to set up why Daenerys does what she does, why she steps into that funeral pyre with her dragon eggs. And so it's really key. I'm not going to break it all down because it could be a 20-minute video just breaking down her dream, but a lot of it is in reference to, who she is and things that motivate her. Another thing is she's running towards this house with the red door that we believe maybe is in Braavos. Some people believe it's in Dorne, whatever. But it's this sign of safety and security for Daenerys, the thing that she's always chasing, that she's now completely lost. She also sees Rhaegar, but then it's not actually Rhaegar, it's herself and Rhaegar's armor, saying that she is the last dragon. Viserys has died, Drogo has now died, she's going to realize her child is dead. She is the last one. And so that dream is very important that they cut from this episode, but one thing I'll say about Daenerys, I've said it almost all the entire season. Daenerys is good in season 1, but she's not what she is in the book. Daenerys is great, and because we're not in her head, we miss so much of just how brilliant her point of views are because of how George writes the character and the surrounding cast that Daenerys has. So I think there's a lot here that is just kind of missing.
Where is he? I want him.
He's cooked, unfortunately, Daenerys.
Where is he?
They say the child was
monstrous, twisted.
Get right to the point, Miri.
I pulled him up myself. He was scaled like a.
So I want to talk about this for just a second. Sorry for all the pauses, but there's just a lot to break down with Daenerys' final parts of her story. One thing here to note is that Daenerys even thinks that she sees the guilt on Jorah's face because Jorah is the one that brought her inside of the tent that then allowed for this shadow ritual, this blood magic to happen that maybe killed her child. So that's what she's internalizing as well here, trying to understand what has just happened. And she's kind of understanding what's starting to happen with this deception that Miri did. And another thing Daenerys is thinking and processing is, did she know the whole time that this was the sacrifice for Drogo? Did she know? And that's something she's contemplating as well.
My child was innocent.
Innocent? He would have been the stallion who mounts the world. Now he will burn no cities. Now his Khalasar will trample no nations.
Very interesting moral question.
I spoke for you.
3 of those riders had already raped me before you saved me, girl.
This Miri's character is so great in the book and in the show.
I saw my god's house burn. Tell me again exactly what it was that you saved.
Your life.
Why don't you take a look at your Khal?
This is one of the best scenes of the book, of the show, just in terms of the great moral question of it. It's like, yes, you saved my life, and in a lot of ways that was a mercy, but Daenerys is also the person that brought upon all this. She wanted to go to Westeros, so that meant that they had to start raiding more. And they, don't get me wrong, the Dothraki were already going to do that, but she did want to go to Westeros. They needed extra gold, they needed extra slaves, and that's what comes from war. And now Daenerys is seeing that. This woman, Miri, and I'm not saying she's a hero, I'm not saying she's a good person, she's not, but she's a very understandable antagonist, anti-hero, whatever you want to say of Miri, that I really love. Like, this is all straight from the book. There really isn't anything different, but I just think, you know, when I see these great scenes in season 1, especially when they're adapted really well from the book, we've got to circle on them. Because the question of what is life when everything is gone, everything you've known, every person you've known is dead, it's a very interesting question. And I really just do love this part of Daenerys' arc. Okay, come on. Come on, Sam. So let's talk all about this as well. So in the book, Samwell is the person that tries to stop Jon and fails, but Sam does tell all of their friends. So their friends come looking for Jon. Jon, by the way, has been traveling a lot. He's gone past Mole's Town, and he's actually hiding out, and he hears, you know, his brother's coming, and he would have been fine, but Ghost actually gives him away. And for a lot of book readers, we think that this is probably because Bloodraven, or the Three-Eyed Crow, basically is manipulating events, that he went inside of Ghost and made sure that Jon went back to the Wall. Another thing, Samwell is not actually with them because Samwell's not a good writer, so he stayed back. So only major differences here. And just like that, R.I.P. Khal Drogo. So the only difference I wanted to bring up here is that Daenerys tries a bit more than this of just like washing him and kissing him. She does try to like seduce him in the way she can. She has just tried to deliver a child, so she can't like have sex with him, but she tries to seduce him in other ways, of course, and that doesn't work. And so then, yeah, she finally does kill him because he's in this zombified state where he'll only eat food if it's put in front of him, and he doesn't really do anything else. He just is devoid of any actual life, albeit he's alive. And going back to that conversation with Miri. So heartbreaking stuff for Daenerys as well. Another thing I should mention with Daenerys that I didn't really talk about in her first scene, or her first couple scenes, is another thing is that Daenerys actually feels the life inside of the dragons. She has basically a dragon egg that she's cradling while she's coming out in and out of consciousness at the beginning of the episode, or in what beginning of the chapter, more or less. And so she feels it. But then when she gives the egg to Jorah or people around her, they don't feel anything. So Daenerys kind of can tell that there's something there, that maybe there is a dragon inside of that egg. And so all the things start formulating and what she's going to actually do.
Your lord's father gave me the pick of the dungeons, and I didn't find no little lordlings down there. This lot.
So I will skip through most of Arya's stuff, and I did skip some other scenes that were not in the book at all, like stuff with Pycelle or Varys and Littlefinger, which are good scenes. There's nothing to really talk about them from a book angle. But with this, the reason I'm going to skip it is, like I said, all this happens at the beginning of A Clash of Kings. This doesn't happen in the first book. Well, I mean, it happens in the story. It just doesn't happen in the first book. But yeah, like what you see in this episode is, you know, Arya leaving King's Landing is very similar to the book. There's not any major differences outside of maybe her interactions with some of the other, you know, kids like Hot Pie and Gendry. But for the most part, it's fairly accurate to book 2, but just not this book. So I'm not really going to talk about it too much.
The Night's Watch will ride in force against the wildlings, the White Walkers, and whatever else is out there. So I'll only ask you once, Lord Snow. Are you a brother of the Night's Watch, or a bastard boy?
Let's stop it right there. So a lot of differences here as well for implications for book 2, more than it is for season 1. I actually really like the way that they actually give a little bit more conclusion to Arya and Jon's stories in the show versus the book. Like I said, in the book, it's very open-ended about Arya, as we don't see her after Ned's death. And then with Jon, this is similar in the way that it's framed. Like, oh, Gior tells Jon, yeah, we're going to go north of the Wall, and he wants Jon to be there. But that's when it ends. Jon basically says, yes, he is a brother of the Night's Watch. He's going to be a man, not go south and all that. So he's committed. But they don't actually leave the wall until like 2 or 3 chapters into Jon's storyline in A Clash of Kings. But like I said, I do think in the show, this is a very good end for his storyline. And I actually think it's probably an improved point from the book. I think that they actually improved his ending overall. So kudos to D&D, and let's get back to Daenerys. So let's stop it right there. There's a lot here to talk about that I don't usually do this. I don't usually go, oh, this is what a character's thinking. But with Daenerys' last chapter in A Game of Thrones, and why I don't think it's the best chapter of the series, but I think it's maybe top 2 for me. It's up there. The whole reason why it's so amazing is because the whole time we're in Daenerys' head, and she almost seems to be like wondering if she's actually sane. Everyone around her views her as mad. They don't know what the hell she's thinking because she's doing all these grand things because she's now accepted the role of being queen, that she's going to be the one that's going to bring back House Targaryen to Westeros. And so she's giving these gifts to her cause, and she's making all these promises. She's freeing even the slaves, and that they're all going to be one Khalasar, that whatever's left. We also get some notes about how most of Drogo's Khalasar has left at this point. They've divided into all these different groups. Really tragic thing is one of the people that Daenerys freed has a really awful end that I won't specifically say. So if you want to know how horrible it is, read the book, I guess. And so Daenerys at this point, she's making all these promises. People think she's completely insane. She's putting her dragon eggs on the funeral pyre, and she seems like she's about to do something really, really grand. Another thing with the funeral pyre, it looks a lot nicer in the show because in the book there aren't really any trees to make the funeral pyre as nice as it is in the show. But all of that being said, it's hard to explain why the book version is so much better than the show version, but it just comes down to, with the show, we don't get to see what Daenerys is thinking. We don't get to see the way she's viewing all these people viewing her as mad. We're only seeing like this third person point of view, and that takes away from what is so grand about this chapter. A lot of people that think Daenerys is going to go mad in the books, a lot of that stems from this chapter, because there's a lot of it in there. And she even utters a line when she's talking to Miri that she says something along the lines of, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like, how close is wisdom to madness or insanity? So that's, all the signs are there. Outside of, the difference here is Daenerys, by the end of the first book, she's become this confident person. She's not the timid girl she started as. And so I think that's really awesome. And let's see how this goes. For obvious reasons, because there's a lot of nudity, I cannot play a lot of Daenerys' things, but will play as much as I can, I guess. Small little Drogon looks so cute. Dany's theme goes so hard. All right, let's pause it there because I can't play anymore for obvious reasons. But with that being said, this is one of the most amazing moments. It's the best ending of a book. Game of Thrones to me has the best ending, just of any of 5 of the books, but this moment is amazing. It just completes her arc in such a satisfying way that's been building up through chapter and chapter and chapter. And I really think that if you're somebody that's only watched the show and you really like Daenerys, or maybe you did like Daenerys before the showrunners destroyed her character, I would highly recommend you read the book, at least just for the first season, because her arc, and I'm not even the biggest Daenerys person, but her arc is just incredible. It's one of the best things I've ever read in terms of from start to finish, her growth and development, being inside of her head, and coming to this moment where we've had all the foreshadowing throughout the book, whether it's through her dreams, her dragon eggs, and her feeling life in them, the very subtle details that George uses to signify that the dragons will return, and Daenerys will be the one to do so. It's an amazing end to Season 1. Now, we have finally gotten to the end of Season 1. I've been basically recording a lot for this video for the last, 2 weeks, and it was an awesome time. I really enjoyed rereading A Game of Thrones. I really enjoyed talking about it for the show. Season 1 is my favorite, if you guys did not realize. I think Season 3 is a close second, but Game of Thrones is the best. In my opinion, it's one of the best adapted pieces of media ever, in terms of book to show specifically. And so I really do appreciate it for that. It got me into this world. I watched the show at least up until Season 4, Season 5 before reading the books. And so I really enjoyed this series. I don't know if I'll do more, because the problem becomes with season 2 and season 3 and 4 is that even though the seasons are still good, they stray a lot more from the books that it becomes so much harder to talk about, because I feel like I'm pausing all the time. Whereas at least in season 1, there are certain scenes I can just skip over. I don't need to talk about them because they're very accurate. With season 2, season 3, and season 4, that is not necessarily the case. So my plan was always to just do season 1 for a couple reasons, to see if you guys wanted to see more of it and how it would do viewership wise, and then 2, because I just wanted to. I really wanted to dive back into the first season and the first book. So that will be the series. I don't think I'm going to go any further with this, not because viewership was not necessarily great, but just because I think that these are a lot of work, and going into book 2, it would be even more work than this first book and season was. And it's also just not reflected nearly that well in the viewership as well. I might change my mind, you know, at some point. If these eventually later down the line, or this video does really well and you guys really want to see it, I'll consider it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for everybody that stayed for this video that was super long, I'm assuming. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.